What's the crack? It's your boy Terry Yak. Back at it again, ladies and gentlemen. For a little bit of film room. Like I said, we're gonna have a short episode today because, like I said, yesterday was 420. It's officially 421 or 21-4, depending on if you do days first or you get my point, chat. You get my point. But hopefully, he's all had a good 420. I know Dart did. Aloha. Well, hello there. We want to thank you. My pleasure, bro. My pleasure. Was fun not having to run things. You know what I'm saying? And just chill. You know what I'm saying? Also, shout out to Easy, as always. The boy, the OG, the man. Sorry, the boy, the man, the myth, the legend. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, we're going to be going through Andrew Wilson on the trigonometry. Now, I've heard, I've seen with my own eyes other people review this of trigonometry, so the stream shouldn't get taken down. But if it does, just in case, I have alternate methods. Well, I'm hoping at least the alternate methods work. Also, shout out to DP Thing, aka Jungle, was saying, stop talking about my wonderful mushroom head. That's shit. I don't know. That's shit, bro, or that's I don't know that emoji. That emoji. This is not the emoji you're looking for, bro. Really, laugh out loud. Beer San, appreciate you kindly. Thank you very kindly, sir. And the donut bar is automatically working again, so we fixed that issue as well. I was suffering from that last week. A lot of issues last week, not gonna lie, but hey, it is what it is. It is what it is, folks. But like I said, we only got 3 hours, and this is about an hour and 3/4 long, so we don't got much time to get around to it. You know what I'm saying? So let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. This is Andrew Wilson versus he triggers the trigonometry panel.
And the outcomes of Christian ethics, even on secular society, are the best outcomes. That's the case I would make for why I think Christians should be in charge of basically everything.
What you're talking about is dominance by one group over everybody else, because we've got a better view, right?
Yeah.
You would outlaw homosexuality.
Sure. Well,
Okay.
I would outlaw homosexual marriage.
But not but isn't homosexuality wrong also?
Sure, it's immoral,
So
but
why wouldn't you outlaw?
you don't need to necessarily always place a law in against something which is immoral. I don't even understand what the purpose is of the vote for women. What is it? What is the point here?
Because it affects them as much as it affects us.
I've never seen a great reason why women should be able to vote. Because they can vote to send men to war that they themselves do not have to go fight. Why do women get exempt from that? If you want me to be blunt,
Why do you hate leftists?
they're psychopaths who are going to destroy everything that I care about through suicidal empathy.
Well, Andrew Wilson, welcome to Trigonometry.
Thanks for having me.
Don, tell us about you, your background, how you've come to be where you are, and also, some of the things that you've become well known for talking about and debating.
Well, I'm known as maybe the premier blood sport debater on the right-wing side. I debate almost every issue imaginable from a Christian foundational view, including politics. So the way I got in the space was by pure accident. It was during COVID-19. They had shut all the businesses down. I was a robotics mechanic, and I worked in meat plants. And they shut those down in Michigan because the governor at the time, her name is Gretchen, she's still the governor, Gretchen Whitmer. That was part of her whole device for Michigan was shutting everything down. So I was basically furloughed. And when that was happening, I was extremely pissed off. And so what I did was I went on Facebook and other places like this and started arguing with stupid progressives, much like the Coomer Gremlin, who you recently debated, people like that. And some of them actually had little video shows. And so I'd started to ask to come up and talk to them. Hey, why don't you have me up on your little show here? And then I'd go on the show and obliterate them. And after a while, that picked up a little bit of steam. People started putting it on YouTube. And then the content became popularized. And here I am. Never thought in a million years I'd be an entertainer. And I never thought in a million years that I would be engaged in as many high-profile debates as I have been.
And why do you enjoy doing this? Because a lot of people think it's
because I hate
a weird thing to do.
leftists. So, I mean, just like, if you want me to be blunt.
Why do you hate leftists?
Because they're psychopaths who are going to destroy everything that I care about through suicidal empathy.
Do you mean progressives or do you mean leftists?
Both.
Like the entire left?
I consider the delineation of the threshold minute.
Because?
Because when you really get into the granularity, it's all about ethics, and they don't have any. And so, because there's no ethical foundation, all you're talking about is degrees of psychopathy.
What about people who just want like a little bit more wealth redistribution, but generally they love America? I mean, those people, they are decreasing in percentage on the left, but they do exist, right?
Why do they want it?
Because they think they have a different vision to the right of human nature, and they think that a lot of things that happen to people in life are partly about luck and structures and stuff like that. So they think that
Also, shout out to Miss Mott saying, based, Andrew. Obviously, of course. And welcome into everybody in the raid. Let me play the clip. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. Also, shout out to Speakeasy. Thank you very kindly for the raid. And because it's Speakeasy, and Andrew's in this clip as well. You know what I'm saying? It's we gotta play the clip so we can be logical.
Well, hang on, stop. Let's start with this. What are the 3 laws of logic? What are they? No, don't look them up. What are the 3 laws of logic?
Do you think this is an inconclusive
What are the
mathematical
3
statement?
laws of logic? There's 3. What are they?
I don't fucking know.
You don't know the fucking laws of logic, dude.
All right.
No, all right, dude. I don't know where you don't even know the 3 laws of logic. This is fucking crazy. You're fucking crazy.
Do you
bro.
want to ask Speakeasy if he knows?
Yeah, it's the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of the excluded middle.
His name is John C.
Anything else, dipshit?
Bellissimo. Also, welcome in the Shante. Hello, good morning, good night. Welcome in. We got Sempator of Chaos. Welcome in, boys. We got Nofai there saying, where am I? Where are we? It's a good question. Appreciate $2. Thank you very kindly, sir. Hope you're well too, Miss Mod. There aren't any CIs too. CIs. Appreciate your thought there. Appreciate you very kindly. Folks, this is the base kind of like aspect that I'm just kind of coming in here. Because this is the thing that's like that's not really being spoken about, or you're definitely not gonna see on the news channels or anything like this. But but it kind of came up with when Easy hopped onto darts earlier on and kind of exposed the whole abortion thing, is this whole aspect, or a lot of argumentation that was going or being put forward to the masses, was that of the tyrant, meaning that the powers that be, the people who held power and made laws and all this kind of stuff, was doing so on the basis of a tyrant mentality. Meaning their rationale was, because I said so. That is the mentality of a tyrant. That is not a position that is zero logic. It is literally zero logic. It is pure subjectivity. It's simply because I said so. That's what their mentality is. There is no logic that they're adhering to. And as we've seen, multiple channels have pulled it up. Pulled it up on the channel multiple times. Plato's kind of like chart for like seeing how far your society is degraded. And at the very top is aristocracy, ruled by philosopher kings, maximum amount of reason, zero subjectivity, using both reason and empirical evidence to demonstrate both that logic is sound, but then also that the empirical is sound. They both reinforce each other. That's the ideal scenario, how you govern, how you make laws, etc., etc. The last stage that Plato goes over is this aspect of the tyrant. Just before the tyranny, though, is always democracy. So number 4 is democracy, number 5 is tyranny. And essentially, the tyrant just rules by whatever his compassion or his particular kind of like instinct is. There's no reason used. It's just because I said so. I'm the tyrant. I'm the ruler. You do as I say. No rationale required. Just that's basically them, and that's how you identify them. Whenever they do, for example, slogans like "My body, my choice." If they accept that argument, they're essentially no better than a tyrant. They don't actually check reason to see if there's any like sound argumentation being said. None of that. It's just, yeah, because I said so. Person's willing to accept that, then that's literally just you're accepting tyranny essentially. You know what I mean? And at that point, like nothing like actually means anything. You know. But if you adhere to reason, like you'll have sound argumentation independent of the individual. So thing of like it being objective and all this kind of shit as well. So because we basically were, one could argue we were already in tyranny with all like Democrats, Joe Biden, the whole kind of lefty policymakers and government that we've had in place for God knows how long. That was basically just tyranny. It was just because they said so. There was no reason or anything like that, and we were just finding science studies and all stuff to try and back up what we already had. It wasn't a thing of we had a claim and then we scientifically or empirically proved it and then provide the logic on this kind of shit. There was none of that. It was just because they said so. You know what I mean? And also shared the vote there for being a member for 5 months says, who knows anything? Especially when I'm speaking. My mom took Tylenol. Don't let take made. Keep up the good fight out there. Appreciate you kindly, sir. So essentially, that's the important thing for kind of like the discussion here, is because what Andrew's going to do in this video is like, and I'm going to let it play for longer periods throughout this, because you'll kind of see what I mean about what Andrew's imploring. Is like, essentially, how do you handle the tyrant? How do you handle the person that says, because I said so? That's my argumentation, because I said so. You cannot have a rational discourse with this person, because it's just because I said so. You're always wrong because I said so. You get what I'm saying? You cannot actually embrace these people, and these people should not have any authority in your society. No level of power should they have access to, because that is a dangerous individual. That is literally a tyrant. You know what I mean? So the only way to beat a tyrant is to out-tyrant them, because that's basically what it comes down to. It just comes down to force. And as you're going to see be demonstrated by Andrew, sorry, I've been talking for a long time. My voice is almost gone already. We're only, 20 minutes, not even 20 minutes into the stream. But yeah, like in terms of that essence, in terms of that essence, since they're basically acknowledging, and like the socialists, the feminists, the even like the whole gay thing, it's like, oh, I was born this way. Like, no, it was a choice. You're supplanting reason in here. If you want to do the whole like tyrant or tyranny kind of like mentality, it ain't going to get you far, because there's always going to be someone with a bigger stick, as they say. So that's basically what you have to do with these people. When these people look you dead in the eye and are saying, yeah, Muhammad's a great moral teacher, or my body, my choice, or whatever, like the socialist, sees the means of production, all this kind of shit. Fundamentally, you need to kind of be okay with saying, yeah, they need to go to the insane asylum, because they're too retarded to actually be trusted with anything. Which again is a sad state of affairs, but as Andrew will demonstrate in this video, he's going to use this mentality where it's like, okay, because like you're saying that you're perfectly fine with tyranny, then there's nothing wrong with me being a tyrant, or using the tyranny mentality, right? And then all of a sudden they'll say, you're not allowed to use the tyrant mentality, but I am allowed to use the tyrant mentality. And as we see, from Andrew's position, there's a whole shit ton more of Christians than there are atheists. So it's not a fight they're going to be able to win, to say the least. Also, shout out to Darth, member for 1 month, says Shante, Teriak, and Jack are the best. Thank you. My pleasure, man. My pleasure. And Enough out there says $2. He says, just and you'll be saved. And then for another $2, he says, just and you'll be saved. I don't know what the ... is, but appreciate you very kindly, folks. We're already to halfway to the first premium meme. But this is the whole mentality. And like I said, once we get to the stage of degradation, just for anyone who's a Plato fan in the audience, once we get to the stage of degeneration and we're at like the tyranny stage, essentially what should happen in the cycle is it goes into the golden age. And this is not just in the Bible, it's also in the Kali Yuga, like all these sacred texts. It's basically the same cycle. You might have heard of, hard men create good times create soft men create bad times create hard men create good times. Basically in that stage, in terms of the hard men, like this is the tyranny stage. So we should be going into the rule of the aristocrats, the Aristocratic rule now, where there's going to be like modern day things, called them like, think tanks, or think of like a board of a very massive company, like think of like the board of BlackRock. That's basically what you're talking about when you're ruling by aristocracy. It's like, yeah, you'll have your like CEO or your king or whatever, but he'll also have his board of directors or his court of philosophers, essentially. And essentially that's how you're going to be, like, that's going to be the real kind of like form of government, and that's how, let's say, the deep state or the shadow government will operate in terms of that aspect. Going forward, from this, the question then is, well, which philosophy ought we take, or which philosophy are we going to gravitate towards? And that's where you instep in Mr. Andrew Wilson, or just Christianity in general. Here's a list of ethical principles we ought follow. Been around for couple thousand years. Bada bing, bada boom. Zeus is back, baby, like I've been saying for the past year. So let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen.
They think the right massively overestimates the consequences of agency. So the idea that sometimes, the caricature of the right would be, well, everyone gets what they deserve because it's a matter of your hard work and talent and application and whatever. And the left, the sensible left, I think, says, well, sure, but luck is a big part of it. There, by the grace of God, go we. Therefore, if someone is struggling, not everyone is struggling because they didn't put in effort. Sometimes shit happens, people get sick, accidents happen, whatever. So we should look after people a little bit more than the people who want the lowest taxes possible. That would be the Steelman argument, I think.
Okay, so that makes sense. So the idea here is social safety nets, right?
Right.
Okay, so how come those aren't voluntary?
Well, probably because you can't achieve the level of redistribution you want without applying some level of force.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because the entire idea of progressive liberalism is supposed to be voluntarism, and that the left-wing government does not force you or compel you to do anything.
No, but that's bullshit.
That's the promise.
No, the point of government is to make people do shit they don't want to do.
Completely agree. But the promise of the leftists, the promise of the progressive, the reason they demand that we have a secular government and we can't move towards Christian ethics or Christian nationalism is because secularists are going to do what's fair. And what's fair is you can do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody else. We're not going to force you to do anything. The evil Christian nationalists will. But here you just laid out a case for how it is that they're compelling me against my will to do various things.
Well, right. I mean, any government is about the thing that really defines a state is the legalized use of force. It's all about the
Totally
use of
agree.
force, right?
That's what the state is.
Yeah, of course. But see, I think if we want to have a discussion about progressives being idiots, like, we're going to be on the same page with that one. But we were talking about distinction between the center left, I guess, and the progressives. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, isn't there quite a lot of reasonable people on the center left who would agree with us that the state is about shaping human behavior and making people do stuff, but what they want is
Yo, Steelboy says, yo, T, have you seen Destiny Spurgeon out on X saying Andrew strawmans him in this? Because he says Destiny doesn't believe in moral facts. I have indeed. I'm hoping to get a ringside seat to a live audience of them going head to head on this, because fundamentally, I was kind of just explaining it there with the what we've seen now, like what you've witnessed over the past 10 years. We've gone from the gays telling us I was born this way, which basically just translates to because I said so. Women, the feminists saying my body, my choice, which again defaults down to because I said so. Socialism, climate change, all these arguments basically default down to because they said so. And Andrew's just kind of basically going to expose this, where it's like, well, if that's what you're saying, if there's no actual like objectivity, and you're literally looking me in the face and saying because they said so, that is the vocabulary, or this is the words or the script of the tyrant, right? So your whole thing of you're not allowed to do Christian nationalism because that would be tyrannical goes straight out the window, because you're no better than I. You're perfectly willing to be a tyrant and use the because they said so, my body, my choice. Well, then we're just going to choose Christian nationalism. There's nothing, you can't say anything. Like the argument is basically defeated. This is like the tyrant is basically defeated now. You know what I mean? Like fundamentally, they're in such a weird position because they've bitten the bullet on this whole moral relativism and all this kind of stuff. Essentially, like they've destroyed themselves. And like I was pointing out, it's like this is what always happens. It always goes through that cycle of, aristocracy to democracy to oligarchy to democracy to tyranny, and then repeat back up to aristocracy, etc., etc. What you're going to see now is the philosophy of Christianity is going to be the grounding factor to the West, because the postmodernists lost the war. They lost the worldview war. You know what I'm saying? They started dividing by zero and thought that they were God. Turns out they were mortal. There's also everyone next Thursday, April 30th, 8 p.m. MST. Come watch me on the first Good Debate hosted and moderated by the one and only Jim Bob. Very machiwa to use. And machiwa to everyone in the audience.
Machiwa, Reggie. Machiwa.
Machiwa, stillborn. I'll be debating Planet Peterson on Christian nationalism versus secular humanism. Should be a good one to watch, ladies and gentlemen. Should be a good one to watch. Forevermore. Hey, my man. But yeah, like that's basically it. Like they've lost. They've lost the world free war. And it's gonna be Christianity. Because this is why I kept saying, like listen, I'm a deist, not a theist, but the atheists have nothing. Like this humanist manifesto gobbledygook that they tried to pass forth. That ship won't sail, bruh. You can't say that you're more relativist and then put forward a set of ethical guidelines. It's an incohesive worldview. You know what I mean? Ergo, they basically shoot themselves in the foot. And there's only one man left standing, and that is your boy Jesus.
Motivated and actually based on some rationale that we might agree or disagree, but is kind of logical, which is about a higher level of, like, I don't believe in zero taxes and no government redistribution at all, personally, right? So therefore, it's just a matter of degrees. And it's about, is it, 5% taxes or, 20% taxes? But once you start getting into the high 80s, that's where I'm at. You know what I mean? Like do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So that's where I think sometimes in these arguments, the existence of the reasonable center right and the reasonable center left gets lost because we're constantly arguing with the extremes of the other side.
Well,
is that fair?
Yeah, I guess, but maybe we can dive into semantics a bit.
If you want.
Okay. So when you say right or left, you agree with me that's dialectical?
What do you mean by dialectical?
Like
they're opposites of each other, you mean?
Well, not just that, but when we view politics in the paradigm in the United States, we view it through a dialectic that is dual. It's left, it's right. So even you said center left, that's plays within a dialectic, right? Yes, there's a center, but it's still left or right. Mm-hmm. Right?
Well, there is it gets more, I don't mean to be pedantic either, but this is where it gets more difficult, because someone could actually be in the center, meaning they have some center right opinions and some center left opinions that don't neatly align with either party. And I think the existence of those people is probably quite underestimated, even in a country as polarized as this one, just from talking to people.
Maybe.
Yeah, but dialectic, I think I agree with.
Yeah, so there's a dialectic. So when we say left, what's the referent? And when we say right, what's the referent? Like, what are we referencing here?
Well, the position relative to the center.
Sure, maybe, but I mean, what is left and what is right politically? Is it social issues? Is it taxes? Is it a mixture of both?
Mixture of both.
Mixture of both. Okay,
Right.
so I think that we can break it down further into pillars. So I think that these are philosophical positions, and people just don't realize it. When you're arguing with a guy like Destiny, the reason he's very frustrating for you to debate with, the reason that he wanted to bog things down into things like the most ridiculous thing in the world, though it's unprecedented. Everything's unprecedented. That's unprecedented, right? The whole idea there, and you pointed this out rightly, is, well, I guess words don't mean anything, right? We just use unprecedented, I guess, when we mean new. When we get down to the core, the pillar that holds up the belief of Destiny, what is it? What is the pillars that hold up the left? What is the philosophical underpinnings?
I don't know in his case. I think in his case, actually, the philosophical underpinning is people who don't agree with him are bad people, and therefore they need to be destroyed.
But again, even to say that the people that don't disagree with you are bad people, how'd you get there? You know what I mean? And this is where, like, it's when we're talking about like the left and the right here. It's like the left's like Marxist and all this kind of shit. It's like they've like the mask has already slipped in this. There is no truth or lies really. There is only like optics and the illusion and power. That's like the only real thing is power, right? So like I don't want to find out the truth in the debate. I want to win. That mentality of the tyrant. Zero reason, zero objectivity. All about the subjectivity and the optics games and the facades, the illusion, all that kind of shit. Do you know what I mean? We need a leprechaun to start attending Teriak's local Orthodox church. Teriak, you know where we could find one? What's this? What's this? This is some like Oompa Loompa filtration, boys. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Do I need to bring out the balaclava? It is what it is. It is what it is.
By any means necessary. I think that's it. So it's about power, really.
Well, I think the idea, the philosophical underpinnings operate from the left-right dialectic. The left-wing pillar is based around anti-realism, anti-moralism. So that's why you end up with postmodernism and many of these other philosophies which come from left-wing liberalism. Those aren't coming from right-wingers. Those are coming from left-wingers.
There's no truth. There is no morals, moral relativity, atheism. This is why communists went so fucking hard after religion. Man, seriously, look into what they done with the Orthodox Church, like even like sending KGB officers in to infiltrate the church and all this kind of shit. Tried to push more left wing and all this kind of shit because the church was like that powerful of an entity. Even the communists, they had internal battles to try and infiltrate all the churches and bring the churches down and all this kind of shit. You know what I mean? That's where it all stems from. This is why, like, you know, atheism leads to democracy, moral relativism, all this kind of shit. It's all equal, and because it all goes down that path. Inevitably, just the tyrant there saying because I said so. You know what I mean? Zero reason, maximum subjectivity.
Right-wingers are the reason that they're so much more associated with things like traditionalism or things like religion, this kind of thing, is because they view society as being duty-bound, and progressives view everything through the prism of rights. So I have a right to do this, I have a right to do this, I have a right to do that. And the right is saying you have a duty to do this, you have a duty to do that, you have a duty. So this is where that dialectic really clashes. From Destiny's standpoint, there's no such thing as a moral fact. None. They don't exist. Everything is dependent upon stance. So if that's the case, you can't actually do anything immoral, which is why he does so many things which are immoral, right? Because from his perspective, it's just dependent on stance. The right is saying there's universality with morality.
But this is why, Steelborn, like, if you notice, even on X, like, Destiny is still so, like, shook up and traumatized from the insurrection debate that and like what Andrew's saying here is that they need something else to attack because they can't actually defend their position. It's the same thing with the Muslims. They cannot actually defend the Quran. So what do they do in the debates? They spend the whole debate attacking the Bible. It's the same thing with Destiny. He will not actually defend his positions because they're just copied and pasted for whatever the Democrat website is. You know what I mean? There's only winning, there's only power. You know, so he's not actually going to defend or stop and think about his own position. He's just going to attack Christianity in whatever way he wants, or he's just going to attack Andrew in whatever way he wants. So he's like, you have to put up a position as well. So I want to be able to attack you because they can't actually defend their shit. You know what I mean? Whereas when you actually break down Christian ethics, there's reason. You can point to reason. Like the whole aspect of, like the main thing that Andrew's saying here in terms of like what is their nature of the ethics? How do they actually justify ethics or morality? They can't. But then they'll also point towards demoralization. How can you have demoralization and not moralization? Both have to exist. If one exists, then both has to exist. Because you cannot have demoralization without moralization. You know what I mean? You cannot have daytime without nighttime. You know what I mean? They're opposites.
It's not just stance dependent. It's stance independent. The reason that they get so upset with the left is because they perceive them as doing things which are horrendously immoral. But from the left stance, they're like, well, but it's all stance dependent. So I can't be doing anything immoral. And that's why the underpinnings for the kind of like philosophical pillars, they don't align, and why we're constantly clashing. The right considers these people complete immoral degenerates. And from their view, they are. The left, on the other hand, sees that as being totalitarian and evil, and that they're there to control, destroy, oppress. Because from their view, what could they be doing immoral if everything which is moral is dependent on their own stance?
Right.
Because I said so.
Which I think is an accurate description of what happens when the right looks at the extremes of the left and the left looks at the extremes of the right. But what I'm trying to get in with you, first of all, because it's interesting to me, because our country, hard as it is to believe, if you look at social media, is not nearly as divided as the US, right? Like the binariness of the US is kind of weird for us a little bit, coming from the UK. So I guess to me, it's always weird when people, well, I was going to say acknowledge, but I don't want to impose my view because, you know, Americans know their country better than I do. It's weird to me how little people give faith to the other side. And I see this on the left and I see this on the right. Whereas my model for the world is there's like really good people within the 80% middle, and then there's pretty out there people on the extremes. And what we see on the internet is those people arguing and pretending they represent the entire movement. And then the other side's incentivized to argue as if they represent the entire movement as well. Does that make sense?
Of course.
Right.
Sure. I understand what you're saying, and that sells, right? It sells to be on that extremist end.
Right.
That's what makes it fun. It makes it fun to watch people who come in and they say ridiculous, over the top things, and then everyone's arguing, right?
Yeah.
That's part of human nature. They want the fun. However, I do think that people are more divided than you think. I think that there's the way that we operate in public in survival mode. We'll be pretty nice to each other. Good morning. How are you? No one's going to like run you off the road because you're a Democrat. They might run you off the road if you're a Trump supporter and you have that stick. But for the most part, we'll treat each other fairly well. But when you start to get to the underpinnings of what people actually believe, there's a lot more hatred here than you think. On both sides, and it's even from the center. It becomes apparent once you start to get to the underpinnings of the pillars which hold up people's beliefs.
Do you think that's kind of why there used to be a rule that you don't talk about religion and politics at the table? Because when you start digging, like if you really pursue people's beliefs to the very ends of the earth, you do find out like people do fundamentally disagree because they have a different philosophical view. But if we don't constantly talk about this stuff, it's actually easier to get on with each other.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's interesting.
Well, that used to be a thing in the workplace, and it used to be a thing like you said, around the dinner table with family. You call your family in, and it's like, hey, we're all going to have dinner. We're not talking politics. We're not talking about sex. We're not talking, right? These are the divisive issues, right? Love, sex, politics. And of course, that's what everybody's talking about all the time now. But with the internet, this was bound to happen. Now you can have ideologies which are exported and imported. And they can be exported and imported quickly. And so because of that, you can have, whole swaths of a population begin to move towards an ideology which they never would have before because there was no way to basically deliver it. But now there is. And so now it's a race for power. It's made the best ideology win. And from my view, if it's not Christians who win it, then it's going to be somebody else who wins it. And Christians going to be ruled by whoever that is. Or what?
So basically, the tyranny is or the tyrant is quote unquote dead. Like from a metaphorical point of view, but like cannot truly like kill an idea in the same way that like you can kill a person and all this kind of shit. You can quote unquote like dwindle the representation of the idea so much so that it basically goes dormant, but it never truly dies. Like think about how long Karl Marx has been dead, but his idea is still plaguing the fucking humanity and all this kind of shit. The only way to put these ideas dormant is to judge to put the judging factor of reason on the table, because as even Constantine pointed out, it's like seems like the extremists are the unreasonable one, but as Andrew's trying to point out, like when you look at like the left wing in general, like none of them can even ground reason in anything. So if your starting like position here is that like you can't even define truth or ground truth, how can we even listen to you? Because you're literally going to make a case that her body, her choice is a reasonable statement, when it is in fact the opposite. It is the best representation of an unreasonable statement. As in, there is no reason in that statement whatsoever. It's just pure because I said so. You know what I mean? And this is why, like I say, like you cannot have a conversation with these, a debate or an argument with these people. You cannot reason with an unreasonable person by definition. You know what I mean? Dearborn says, well, sword of power is up for grabs at the moment in the US. So the question right now is who's going to take Excalibur for their side. Exactly. What aristocracy are we going to build or put in place? It has to be one based in Christian ethics. Otherwise, the West will fall. And also shout out to Not Fault there for the $2. Appreciate you, Connie, sir.
Whatever ideology that is. But if you think that I'm wrong, explain Hassan Piker, explain Vosh, explain the rise of communism in the United States and the brand new communist lens in which many leftist progressives are now looking. These are the most popular streamers. Well, I mean, that ideology was all but dead, but now it's reemergent through the technology of the internet and introduced to a whole new generation as being edgy and countercultural, just like it was the first time.
Do you not think that the reason that we have seen this resurgence of communism as someone who comes from a country who sadly embraced it?
Britain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's not. We are
I shouldn't laugh at
embracing.
my own joke, but it was a good one.
Yeah,
Anyway.
we are embracing it, which is Venezuela. Do you not just simply think that people grasp for anything when things are getting particularly difficult?
You mean for any type of ideology?
Yeah.
Sure, but what's difficult here?
Well, the gap between rich and poor is ever widening.
But you have a problem there, right? That's true. But people are still getting richer than they've ever been. It's like when I think of a gap between rich people and poor people, if we go back 500 years or 1,000 years, the difference was you lived in a dung heap and this guy lived in a castle. Now the difference is this guy lives in a castle and you live in a 3-bedroom apartment. It's like, it is true that the guy living in the castle is richer than the guy in the castle has ever been. But the reason you're not in a dung heap is because the poor are also richer than they've ever been. And so it's scalable. It's a matter, it's a matter of scalability. But show me in the fattest country in the world, where's all the starving people? Where are they?
But it's all understood within context, isn't it, Andrew? It's comparisons. So people will go online, they will look at their life, they will see that they don't have a lot of money, somebody else is doing very well. Things like, for instance, a housing crisis, particularly in cities like New York, LA, etc.
Yeah, so this is a strict materialist view. The thing is like, I don't know when this shift happened to strict materialism, but this seems to be part of a new conversation which people want to have. And again, that's part of what communism is. The lens of communism is strictly materialist. There is no spiritualism. Communists kill anybody who's religious because that affects a materialist view. It's an oppressor-oppressed class. So if you're looking through everything from a materialist view, you can always find an oppressor class. There'll always be people who have more than other people do. It's one of the big faults with communism. You can never reach this stateless utopia. But as far as that goes, when I think historically, the endless suffering that happened to people inside of nation states, inside of city states, inside of places like that, in comparison to what you see in modern Western democracies, it's like if these people had to deal with that in any capacity, they would. You just fall over dead. It was miserable. It was literally misery. Where is all of that? I mean, the West conquered that. Industrialization conquered that. The starvation's gone. Where is it? You know, I've heard liberals, they've said to me, there's people starving right now. Where? In my nation. Where? I'll go feed them right now. Guarantee you I'll have a meal arranged by this afternoon if you could show me a person who's actually starving in the United States. They can't, because they're not. We've conquered it. These are conquered issues. So what are you bitching of? Are you just bitching that this guy makes way more money than this guy? It's like, what's the complaint? You know, that's achievable. That sort of dream's achievable now to people. That never used to be possible.
I travel a lot, and until recently, every trip started the same way. Standing in an airport, fumbling with a SIM card, or downloading yet another app.
And again, this is like something that they say it's all relative. It's like, yes, but let's actually put it in relation to another, right? This is on like the PPD podcast where I forget who it was, but like one of the dudes was like, oh, I think like, you know, we should tax 90% of every dollar, like not every million, every 3 million. And then PPD starts laughing his bollocks off. And the dude was like trying to continue on and all this kind of stuff, but PPD is literally like laughing out loud on statements because he's like, I see how it is. Let's always tax the dudes that are just a little bit richer than me. You know what I mean? It's always that thing. It's like because of my perspective, all this kind of shit. But as Andrew kind of like outlined there throughout history, you go back to the days where it's like the quote unquote most oppressed, when you had like the kings and all this kind of stuff. Like these dudes were like living on like the thing of the farm. Like they literally didn't even have 2 cents to their name. So we've gone from that to some dude living in a castle to you living in a dung heap to now, yes, some dude living in a castle who has even more wealth than the dude that was living in the castle before, but you're living in a 3-bedroom apartment. You're living better than the dude who was living in the castle back then. What was that? What caused that? That is a conquering of poverty. That is a conquering of starvation. This is where it's like gratitude can actually give you a real kick in the ass that you need. Kind of say, maybe I got things a lot better than I think. Maybe I spent too much time trying to get the American dream, realizing I kind of already had it all along. You know what I'm saying? Steelborn says, FDA, there is no rational account for theism. There is only theistic account for rationality. God damn. God damn. It's like we speak in poetry. Beauty. Straight beauty right here, boss.
You didn't do it sooner.
I think it also plays into the fact that this generation, particularly, for example, in the UK, is going to be the first generation to not do as well as their parents. And the things that they were promised, you know, you go to college, you get a good job, you're going to be able to have a house, a family. For a lot of these people, they come out and they've graduated college, they're in enormous amounts of debt, and they're looking and they're seeing, well, the life that my parents had, I am not going to have. And I think there's a great deal of anger, resentment and frustration because of that. And I think people reach for an ideology such as communism in the desperate hope that it's going to somehow make everything better. I don't agree with it, but I think that's the argument.
Well, I think that I think it's more complex than that.
So what, maybe we're having this conversation the wrong way around. Why do you think there's been rise of radical leftism and particularly the appeal of communism now, as you do see with some young audience fans?
Because of the moral loading of the term Nazi, fascist, and other things like this. It's pure panic mongering. The idea is that you need to move towards this shielding ideology because the Nazis are coming, the stormtroopers are coming.
Oh, so you mean like since 2016, basically? I mean, they did it before as well, but the far left has been calling the right Nazis, and you think people are going for communism because it's the ideology that can protect you against that? That's
Communism, socialism. These are so it's a winner takes all. Like I said, it's a race to power for which ideology gets power.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be the Christian nationalists? Is it going to be the socialists? Is it going to be guys in New York like Mamdi or Mamadi? What is his name?
Mamdani. Yeah.
It's communist Mamdani.
Yeah.
Who gets it? Which ideology gets it? I mean, right now, the ideology which has been kind of traditionally getting it is the status quo ideology. Well, that's changing. That's been changing since Trump. Like, I don't know who our future presidents are going to be, but they're not going to have the same ideologies that they held for the last 40 or 50 years. That's not where we're heading. So which ideology gets it?
But that doesn't, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, except the one thing we started this with, which is the appeal of communism is to push back against the Nazis, right? But why wouldn't you just, I don't know, why wouldn't it just the ideology be like we're against Nazism or we're for liberal democracy?
But that's exactly how it's pushed. What do the Antifa, anti-fascist people in both our nations say? They say just that. This is about our republic.
But
this
they
is
are
about our
communists.
democracy.
But they
yes,
are
they are.
Right.
But this is about our democracy. This is about our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly. This is about stopping Nazis and stopping fascists and stopping or allowing for due process. They literally market it the exact way you just said. So when you say, why don't they say that we're just anti-Nazi and pro-democracy or pro-republicanism? Well, that's exactly how they market it.
No, because I guess the reason I'm saying is like, I would say I am anti-Nazi and pro-democracy, right? And I am. I'm also not.
Because you need an ideology that is against capitalism. And you can't say, oh, well, I'm just against capitalism because there's so many other things then that you could be. You know what I mean? So in the same way where it's like, I need to go against Nazis, and the reason why they like that's the first thing and that's the enemy that they target is because they are communist, and the enemy to a communist is National Socialist. Because the whole like Hitler portrayed Stalin, you have the whole history there and all this kind of shit. But fundamentally, like if these people genuinely were communists, they wouldn't be siding with a bunch of these Islamists. These socialists would not be siding with a bunch of fucking Muslims. Which means their true ideology is whatever the West is not. That's the true way to describe like what these motherfuckers are. Anything that is not the West. So the same way we have like this problem of like the slave mentality where you'll just blindly follow whoever has the biggest stick or blindly follow the like whoever has the authority. There's the inverse to that, which is basically the same thing where it's like you're still a sheep, but you're just going in the opposite direction that the authority tells you. You're not actually clearly thinking for yourself. You know what I mean? The other one says, this is where I kind of disagree with Andrew. Like I make 1K a week, and it's still a question of rent or spaghetti. Unless there's serious change, my wife and child never own a house. Yes and no. This sounds like a cop-out, Steelborn, but give it a year. Give it a year. Let Donald Trump cook for a year. Trust me. There's going to be a lot of course correcting. We got Abe Dinkus in chat. Welcome in, Abe. I kind of want to cover this on my channel at some point. Yeah, like I think everybody's going to be doing the rounds of it as well. Lose to Mr. President. Welcome in, Ice Tammy. Good eye, mate. But yeah, like this is kind of like the key thing where like what you've seen from the leadership is the tyrant, just because I said so mentality. And what you see from the useful idiots is like, I mean, just use the Iran situation as thing, like they're rooting against their own country even though the country, Iran, like the regime, is completely against everything they claim to be in the West. They claim to be pro-woman, like women's suffrage, women's rights, all this kind of stuff. The Iranian regime is anti-woman. They claim to be pro-homosexuality. The Iranian regime is anti-homosexuality. You know what I mean? When you get to that point, it's they don't actually have a position. They're just against whatever the status quo is. You know what I mean? And this is why they all went to being communists, is because we're currently being led by National Socialism. And they know that they can't, if they just like feed into National Socialism. That's pretty much what the current offers on the menu anyway. You know what I mean? Food for thought. Just a bit of food for thought for you. You know what I'm saying? I agree with that. Oh, wait, one sec. Depending on what generation you're in, I guess, I have a exclamation or 1400 mortgage, and we're halfway to paying it off. Not bad, not bad. My Sammy says, I agree with that, Teriak. I think it's the first year of this term has been a lot different than his first, and in a way, different issues. We got to let things run our course, 100%. But you younger cats are cooked, though, with these rates, and I get that. I'm telling you, Trump's been talking about not having to pay income tax in the near future. Could be crazy. Could be a bit of delirium or whatever the fuck slipping out in old age. But I think he's got a plan. I think he's going to cook. Stabby says, once it's all over, then we can give our final thoughts on Trump's presidency. That's where my head is. That's a good place to be. It's a good place to be. Also, a tip from Jack of Blades on the Ko-Fi, ladies and gentlemen. He says, today was a good day. Hit the goal we did. God bless my motherfucking man. Let me give you a little bit of shredding for that one, sir.
You remind me of what I really
We're having fun. Yeah, I'm going to crank the speed up to 1.25 for now because we're running a bit behind, folks. I do got to let it play because I can only do another 2 hours today. So, like I said, we gotta start practicing, getting going on stuff. But shout outs to you, Jack. Thank you very kindly for the 50 and Will for the 50 goal. I guess I'm going to go with the Andrew clip because again, we're doing a little bit of Andrew Wilson, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Mr. Motherfucking Andrew Wilson.
I think that women should be grateful. They should be grateful. They live in the best society ever, and it's all built on the backs of not them. The air conditioning, which enables them to even exist, everything which allows them to exist in modernity is built by men, and they're the most ungrateful, snot-nosed brats about it that you've ever seen. And there's really no cause for it because they bring nothing to the table, none of them, including the old bags here who bring nothing to the table by their own admission except their and that, to me, is why, and when asked, this is all you get. I bring love and affection. You don't bring to the table. And that's why you can't even answer the damn question, no matter how many times we ask it. And it makes me sick because that is modernity.
Absolute mic drop and a half, ladies and gentlemen. But let's get back to it.
Not a communist. So why is communism the appealing version of those statements?
Well, this is a worldview issue. So do you think a Nazi is the same thing a leftist thinks a Nazi is?
No.
Because a leftist thinks you're a Nazi.
Well, I know what words mean.
Right?
But this is the problem, is like, I know what words mean, right? So I know that Nazis exist. And by the way, there are some Nazis on the right, including in the US, and you can see them, right? But I also know what a Nazi is, and therefore someone who has right-wing or centrist opinions like me is not a Nazi.
But words do mean different things depending on worldview. They do, actually.
If you are a postmodernist, they do,
Not
right?
just a postmodernist. So if you look at definitions of words, you agree they have multitudes of definitions, right? Well, those are applying often to the distinctions in worldview. When I say spiritual as a Christian, I'm looking at that from a Christian view, right? If you say spiritual as a Buddhist, are we saying the same thing?
I actually think in a way you probably are, but the structure that underpins that is different. But you're trying to point at the same thing, which is whatever it is that is greater than human beings somewhere. And I'm pointing to the sky because that's kind of.
But the way we view epistemology, ontology, cosmology, everything is going to be completely different. So when we say that word, we may be pointing to a concept which is similar, but we're actually pointing at something which is different.
But what progressives do, and this is really worth discussing, I think, is what they do is if I say the word cabbage, there's 100 types of cabbage, but you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And what a progressive will do in a debate, as you referenced, is they'll pretend they don't know what a cabbage is.
Yeah, that's equivocation,
Right.
So the fallacy, debating with progressives, I've been doing it for years and years. The number one fallacy you run into with them, fallacious form of argumentation, is equivocation. They use the ambiguity of words to switch between its meaning, depending on which one serves them best at the time.
Yeah.
Which is why you have to pin them down on semantics immediately, because if you don't, they'll spend an entire debate session or conversation using equivocation to move between meanings in an ambiguous way, so that they never really have to give an accounting for the things that they actually think, because those things are abhorrent. I do agree with that. I also understand, though, that meanings of words are going to change with worldview. From the progressive worldview, you are a Nazi. And I wish
Because
more
I
people,
don't agree with them.
I wish more people would accept, well, it's not just because you don't agree with them. It's because from that frame, from that worldview, right, they're going to perceive you as being a white nationalist. You're a person who thinks that white people are above other people.
Why?
Because you're arguing against mass migration. And the only reason you would do that is because you want to see more white people.
But I'm an immigrant myself.
Doesn't matter.
Well, but no, it does matter, though, because that doesn't make any logical sense.
Doesn't have to. Worldviews don't have to make logical sense, but they are the prism in which we interpret the world. And so every debate that you have and every conversation you have, I wish more people would go in them understanding this concept. Worldview is what shapes your interpretation of all of reality around you. It shapes the meaning of words, how you interpret them, what people mean by the things they say, and what they don't mean by the things they say. The reason I think I got very popular on the right is because one of the things I've always done is sit down and make my opposition actually explain what they mean and why they mean it before I will ever even dive into a conversation with them. And the reason for that is because I want to know what their worldview is. What is it that you're interpreting different here than me? And that's where you start to actually have a debate about. So debates are about worldviews. Conversations are about worldviews, right? If we have completely different understandings of our interpretation, how do we even speak?
But there's also a level of deception we're talking about here, because if you take an ideology like Nazism, there's tenets to it.
Sure.
And if you then go, well, you're a Nazi, but then you don't obey or follow any of the tenets, then that is fundamentally illogical.
I've had multiple debates with people on whether or not Donald Trump's a fascist, okay? From their worldview. See, it's simple. All you have to do is you take the historic prism of what fascism is. They'll admit, clearly he doesn't meet that. But he meets certain tenets, which we can say have overlap with fascism enough that they reach like a fascist minimum. Well, what the hell does that mean? Well, it just means that interpretively, from their kind of stance-dependent view, right, which means I made it up, this arbitrary metric, he meets it, therefore he is it. Now, unless you have some grounding which is objective, how do you argue with that? Well, you really can't, because what most political debating is it's taking a fact and then it's arguing about your feelings over that fact. That's 90% of what a political debate is. Here's a fact, and now let's argue our vibes. So unless there's some objective grounding that you have to tell them that they're wrong, right, it's actually very difficult to...
Couple of days ago, but like we're basically getting into the meat and bones of this. Is like essentially like the left-wing philosophy has now been exposed to tyranny. It's been exposed for the tyrant that it is. My body, my choice equals because I said so. Do you know what I mean? Because I said so. That is the script of a tyrant. They have no grounding in it. They'll use equivocation because they don't want the truth. They want to win.
Get the upper hand in a vibes debate, isn't it? So you really have to bring it back to not just facts, but foundation. They don't have any. This is why I hate them, because they're morally corrupt, ambiguous, no morality having scumbags. And that's what they want to do. They want to take a fact and argue their vibes about the fact. But when you get to their foundations, what is their foundation? They don't have any. Their entire foundation is there are no moral facts. So if that's the case, how can you do anything immoral if there's no moral facts? How? You can't. You can't ever do anything immoral if you don't believe there's no moral facts.
Well, but
And this is what like we're getting to. Like that's what my parents used to say when I was a kid. When you're a kid, you only have the mentality of a tyrant. A kid doesn't fully grasp like logic and the laws of logic and reasoning and rationale, like the difference between, you know, a sound argument and an unsound argument, or a valid argument and an invalid argument. So when it gets to that, like, there's no point of trying to explain reason and logic to a tyrant. You just have to out tyrant the tyrant. You know what I'm saying? And that's why parents have more force than their kids. Why the kids listen to the parents because they say so. Because the parents as well have all the force. The fuck's a 2-foot nothing kid gonna do against the parent? Absolutely fucking nothing. You know what I mean? But through that, that's the wisdom that you must instill into your children, is to get them to follow reason, get them to follow logic and the practical. And then, like I said, from there they become enlightened. They transcend to the next level, all this kind of stuff. But what we have is a bunch of like boys that never became men. They never grew up. They never understood reason and logic for what it is. Truly a divine miracle, one might say. You know what I mean? So this is why their argumentation is always because I said so, or my body, my choice, or I was born this way, or like all this bullshit that's not a reason. And what are you going to do with all these tyrants that refuse to engage in reason? They have zero reason, maximum feelings and vibes. As Andrew was saying, it's just a vibes debate. There's no rationalizing with that. By definition, irrational. It's unreasonable. It's illogical.
We believe that we are with all our different perspectives, because we have different perspectives on things. You and I certainly. Well, they believe that we are immoral, so they must have some kind of morality. It's just
Stance-dependent morality.
meaning. What's the difference between that and what your morality? Because you would say your morality comes from God or the Bible, or
Sure. There's two kinds.
Yeah, so like Andrew's morality would be objective. That no matter the person's name, that like these, like how you ought to treat a human is unchanging. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that we treat victims the same way as criminals and criminals the same way as victims, all this kind of shit. But an example of how you can demonstrate the left has no objectivity to it, like, for example, if a trans person threatens to self-delete, we have to get society to start saying that a man can become a woman. But if a Christian starts threatening to self-delete because they won't put Jesus back in the schools, well, the Christian can go fuck themselves. The logic is inconsistent.
There's two kinds of foundations for how it is that you can interpret morality. There may be more, but there's usually going to be two. It's is morality real or not? If it's not real, then you're an anti-realist, let's say. If it is real, then you're not. When I say real here, I'm saying this is a universal fact, that this is a moral fact. Now, the left and progressives and atheists and secularists, they don't generally believe in those moral facts. They think that morality is a social construction that we make up, and it's societally dependent. There is no overarching like moral facts. The religious say that there are, that God gave us moral facts, and these are the moral ways in which you have to live your life. And so they're willing to enforce that. They're willing to enforce those moral facts, because for them not to do that is immoral, right? Allowing my society to run around and do immoral things, obviously I want to curtail that. The other side thinks that that's totalitarian, though, right? That's the worldview divide. So the question is, how can you tell a person, how do you tell Destiny that it's immoral that he sucked 50 dicks? How do you do that? If it's the case that that's not a moral fact. How? Well, you can't. And that's where they live. That's
well, his sucking of dicks is irrelevant to me personally. He's perfectly entitled to suck as many dicks as he wants. I encourage him to do more.
Yeah, but why? Why is it that the this idea of like OnlyFans hookers and homosexual marriage and stuff like this, why is that stuff we have to deal with again? Like why?
Why isn't it?
Well, see what I mean though? Like even that question, why isn't it? It's like that's not giving an accounting for a worldview. That's asking me to give an accounting for a worldview. Yeah. But the thing is,
you're insisting that there is a worldview that's correct,
sure,
right? And therefore it's up to you to articulate why it is correct.
Sure, but when you say why isn't it?
It's a genuine question. I'm trying to probe your worldview, that's all.
And I'm gonna walk you through it. If there are no moral facts, because I said so, that's why. And that's the failure of left-wing and progressive anti-realists. If there are no moral facts, and you ask me why it is that I should enforce my worldview, because I fucking want to.
Because I said so. The tyrant. The script of a tyrant. Because I said so. What it comes down to. My body, my choice. I want to kill my kid because I said so. Zero reason, zero logic, zero argumentation, all subjectivity, tyranny. And Plato wrote about this 2,500 years ago. At the very top is aristocracy, then democracy, then oligarchy, then democracy. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the tyranny, brought to you by destiny. You know what I'm saying? You can fucking write a song about it. Remember, because they said so is the script of the tyrant.
There's no way for you to ever object against that. Any objection you have, which is stance dependent, which it will be, it's going to be the same objection that I give you, which is stance dependent. So which one of us is right?
Well, that's why we have elections, so that is adjudicated and then legislated on, right? Because ultimately there's philosophy and then there's politics, right? So you might philosophically believe that homosexuality is wrong, but at the level of society, we can have a vote, and it may turn out that the majority of the country doesn't agree with you.
But do you agree with me that your morality cannot come from the majority? Because if it does, all you're doing is doing the exact same thing. You're just saying, hey, now the majority says there are no moral facts, or only moral facts come from the majority.
Well, sure.
If that was the case, then we could have slavery, and that would be moral simply because the majority said it was.
And at one point it was, right?
And those
people believed in God way more than we do.
Well, yes,
they did.
This
right?
This is true. But the thing is like that's the idea of presentism. The whole world always believed in that. Just like the whole world usually didn't entertain things like race mixing, though they had no conceptualization of race. They thought of things in a tribal way.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that either. Like, it was one of the things, the United States always gets shit because in the 20s, 30s, 40s, especially heading into World War II, post-World War I.
It depends on the prompt, Stillborn. But if you can, then like if you can relate that as like by using that as your main analogy, depending on what the prompt is, if you can, then that'd be the best way to go about it. And then just basically turn into an abortion debate and then just keep just ground and pounding from there. Just do whatever makes you happy. It's not hurting anyone. You know what I mean? Because I said so. It's tyranny. It is literally tyranny. And once you're able to identify that and call them on it, then they're basically stuck. Like you saw on Darspan earlier on. What right do you have to tell a woman what she can and can't do with her body? Like, yeah, it's tyranny. It's the message of a tyrant because she said so. Because she's worth it. Think of like all these slogans that was just gently and beautifully just popped into your head through all these advertisers. Because she's worth it. Because he said so. You know? This is the best you can get. No reason or argumentation. Christian Nashism versus secular humanism. Basically, if you can get them down, like you should be able to just do the Socratic method in terms of secular humanism. Like that'd be the way I'd do it. I'd let him like do all his whole spiel about secular humanism, Maharm principle, all this kind of shit, and then eventually get him down to a more relativist point of view. Once you're in that, then you can kind of say, well, why can't we just kill kids? Why stop at birth? You know what I mean? And then you can say like whatever heinous shit you want to do. Is like, why can't we just like, use babies for like spare parts? Like what's stopping me from doing that? Like I can basically just like grow these babies, harvest their organs, grow them for like billionaires. Then billionaires can live an extra 50 years. So I'm technically increasing the human lifespan. That's perfectly fine, right? That we just harvest these innocent children's organs, right? There's a lot of different ways you can go about that, Stillborn, and I wish you the best of luck, although I know it's going to be a ground and pound. Victoria had a secret that everyone knew about. Exactly. You know what I mean? But it's basically, once you recognize it for what it is, like just pure unadulterated tyranny, then you're like, oh, And then you're like, yes, like no wonder they ground logic in God. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning there was reason.
Well, there was a lot of there was a lot of segregation with black people. Well, that was global, though. That was global. Everyone was racist then. Like
Sure.
everybody.
Sure.
And so you're looking at this through the prism of presentism, and the reason that that's
Look,
kind of
come back to the Destiny sucking dicks point because it's important,
Yeah.
obviously, right? Why is it that you think he shouldn't suck dicks?
because I said so. And if you're an
But that's fair enough.
Right.
Because I said so. Like that's what I'm saying in terms of this stillborn. There's like what you need to do is like crank that up to 11. Turn that up to 11. You know what I mean? And be like, yeah, like we need to have even more abortions so then we can harvest even more organs. And then everyone who's living, we can increase their lifespan. Because like we're killing all these babies and using their organs so that the old people can live even older. You know what I mean? And then basically confront saying, well, there's nothing wrong with your moral system to say like that's perfectly fine because technically we're making humans live longer. That's human flourishing, correct? You know what I mean? So like try to use it from that perspective, stillborn, by saying that like, oh, like we can harvest the youth, we can sacrifice babies to make the old wealthy people live even longer. And then at any point you can just slip in abortion and basically tie to. Are you telling me to heaven, Max? Yeah, like basically, ironically, like use Avarice's like meme argument as you're kind of like, well, secular humanism should love this shit, right? That's heaven, Max, bro. Or like human flourishing, Max. So like, how would I be able to increase the human lifespan? Well, if I was able to like harvest a bunch of these kids, harvest their organs, and then grow them synthetically in a lab, etc., etc., etc. You know what I mean? Having a dodgy heart is a thing of the past. You can just buy a new human heart. We just grow them in the labs, but we harvest them from babies and all this kind of like all the sick shit. And then you basically have a field day. You're just basically painting this dude to be a fucking crazy whack job scientist. Which is probably a lot of these people who follow secular humanism. Like that's basically who's guiding it. It's like, oh, I want to like think of like Dr. Fauci. There have been so many stupid people in the comments of the video, Trigonometry, talking shit about Andrew. Bro, that's part of the game. People love to hate. Haters gonna hate. Ainers gonna ain't. You know what I'm saying? We even got the clip.
Haters gonna hate. And ainers gonna ain't.
That is not an actual thing people say.
You know what I mean?
But then the question is, are you seeking to convert your philosophical view into political reality?
Why shouldn't I?
I suppose that's a fair question, actually. Yeah.
Why shouldn't I?
Well, I guess it's a question of what happens when the majority of the public vote for somebody who doesn't.
Now we're
really
just
exist.
outsourcing our morality again to the populace.
But see, there's laws that I don't agree with,
Right.
And there's laws that don't exist that I think should exist. But I accept that the majority of the country in which I live doesn't agree with me.
Yeah, but why'd you accept democracy in the first place? You're presupposing that democracy is correct. Like, I just want to shake people's heads sometimes. Like, why? Oh my God, man. Like, did the 2020 election not show you that, like, democracy is an illusion in the West? Did the whole USAID scandal, the fact that they were clearly using that money to subvert other cultures so then they'd get the desired outcome in the election of that given country. I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, how many times do I have to like expose it? How many times do I have to lift up the curtain and say like, this is the actual system? You're an idiot if you think that like this is all democracy and all this kind of shit. I don't know, bro. I don't know. Tried to warn them. That's why I say, like, I've fucking been saying for the past year or something like that. Zeus is coming back. All this kind of shit. And they're like, nah, bruh. Like, Fy favore. Fy favore. You could bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
And that is a kind of compromise we all have to make at some level, right?
Why do we have to make that compromise?
Because we want to live in a society of other people
that's-
who have different views.
But
right
now we're moving into the right reduction, and so I guess maybe this is where I wanted to get to in the conversation. If there aren't any moral facts, and I just say because I said so, and you say, well, that's fair enough, right? Because that's all all of us are just doing because I said so, I guess.
All of us are entitled to a view.
Yeah, I don't want democracy because I said so. I want fascism because I said so. I want a new Hitler because I said so, right? Let's say that.
Would you kindly? Would you kindly? Remember the whole Bioshock thing that I showed you? Would you kindly go and kill Andrew Ryan? You know what I'm saying? As I said so. Bunch of fucking tyrants. That's all these lefties are a bunch of fucking tyrants. And ironically, Jordan Peterson was the one that was like banging the fucking bell 12 years ago.
If you can't point at that and say that that's wrong, right? There's some objective appeal to a standard for why that's really immoral and you shouldn't do it, then what happens is erosion. And the reason that erosion happens is because everything becomes permitted. So an example of this, I was told with gay marriage that it's no big deal. It's just like heterosexual people getting married. Well, okay, well, what's the argument against 3 men or 4 men getting married and then adopting a child? There really isn't one. You can't really be consistent and be against that. Like, where's the consistency issue? You can say, well, it's the outcomes. It's like, well, can you prove the outcomes will always be bad? No? Or can you prove that if there's 2 straight people who are heterosexuals who are from vastly different backgrounds, they could have really bad outcomes statistically too. It wouldn't prevent them from having a kid. It's like, what's stopping 10 men from getting married and adopting a kid? Nothing. Nothing's preventing that. And by the way, it's happening now. Now you see men getting married in 3s and 4s. And you see polygamy coming back in a big way. You see birth rate collapses. Like, these are real issues in society. And they
I mean, in fairness, I don't think birth rate collapse has to do with 10 men getting married to each other, right?
No, it has to do, but it has to do with another issue, which is women. If you want to get women pregnant, you have a small window, and it's best to do it in their 20s. And what we do is we tell women to defer their best childbearing years to go to college during those years, which is insane. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't know why you would take the opposite sex who has the most limited window for childbirth for healthy babies and tell them to squander all of that. Especially because they end up at college running, the cock carousel often and things like this. And it's like, it's just not good for society. But kind of back to what I was saying, when we're getting to the idea of moral facts, this erosion always begins with the idea of, well, you can't really make a case, like I don't believe in your stupid objective morals. I don't believe in any of this. And so you can't really tell me that being a hooker is wrong. You can't really tell me doing this is wrong. You can't really tell me doing that is wrong. And so if you come to me and you say gays should be allowed to get married, and I just ask you back, why can't 3 of them get married? What's your answer to that? What is it?
I have people in my life who depend on me. Most of you listening do too. And if you're honest with the question, /trigger.
What is it?
I don't have one.
Yeah, exactly. So what's preventing it? Nothing. And so then it just you see society become more and more and more absurd over time.
Why is it important? What happens when 3 gays get married? Like,
well, individually, perhaps nothing, right? Like on an isolated. Like, what happens when 1 Muslim gets imported to the UK?
Nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it depends what he does, but yeah.
Exactly. But now what happens when 50,000 of them get imported to the UK? Well, now something. And it's the same thing when it comes to the importance of moral character inside of a nation is the exact same way. Well, what happens, it doesn't matter.
To clarify for me, Andrew, so when you have, we have, I think, 4 million Muslims in the UK. Overwhelming majority are perfectly good people. But when you have a large Muslim population, what we've discovered is you have a smaller percentage of extremists and Islamists, right? What happens when gays get married? What is the Islamist version of that?
Yeah, so what happens is, if you're going to say 3 men can get married, then you need to be able to say 1 man can marry 3 women.
Why?
Because tell me what argument could you possibly have against it if you allow one and not the other? What?
I suppose if you start unpicking laws like that, you probably unpick most laws, right?
Yeah.
On that basis.
It would erode the moral character of the very thing you're trying to preserve, which is your culture. But your whole culture is founded on Christian ethics. And so if you say, when you ask individually, what's wrong with 3 guys getting married? Maybe I could say, maybe the effect is so minimalistic, who cares, right? But that's not the point. The point is that if you let 3 men get married, then you have to let 1 man marry 3 women. Why wouldn't you? What would be the consistent argument between the 2?
That's a pain in the ass, man.
Yeah.
Having 3 wives.
Maybe, but the thing is like, how would polygamy?
So what's your answer to all those questions? Your answer is God said this is right, this is wrong, therefore that's how we know what's right and wrong, basically. Was that fair?
I would say something more important, which is that Christian ethics, even if you don't believe it. Let's say, I'm not a Christian, I don't believe in any of that nonsense. What you should believe, though, is in outcomes. And the outcomes of Christian ethics, even on secular society, are the best outcomes. So if that's the case.
And also it's grounded in reason. Right? That would be the first thing. Is like, it's not just because God said so, or had a vision, or had a dream, and God told me in the dream. It's because reason. This whole aspect of like divine intelligence, the universal mind, the actual grounding is through reason. That every single Christian ethic or Christian principle is done so, explained through reason. Here's the reason. And it's not only that there's the logic, but then there's also the empirical, the actual practicality to it as well, that we see manifest, which is what Andrew's highlighting here. This whole aspect of, you have all these Muslims that want to get into Christian countries. You have all these like third worlders trying to go to Christian countries. The outcome of Christian ethics. You know what I mean? Which would point towards that these rules or these guidelines, pretty good fucking rules and guidelines, not gonna lie. You know what I'm saying? Also, speaking of which, ladies and gentlemen, how long Nate with the $5 says Andrew kicking ass on the world stage. My fucking man, let me hit you with the little bit of money clip for that one, sir. Appreciate you kindly, Nate. Thank you very kindly for the $5. Also, Real Deal says, the Muslims are the one world religion speaking of in Revelation. Changed my mind. Hey, I don't want to be an end times preacher, but read your Bible, folks. That's all I'm saying is read your Bible, you know. I need to know what this clip is from. It's a good one. It's a good one. You know what I'm saying? Good to see you, Nate. Good to see you. Steelborn says, Teriak, honesty outside of orthodoxy. Most Christians, in the comments, will just say because God said so, whereas Orthodox can give an accounting for every position we hold. Yeah. Reason shall prevail. That's what I'm saying. Like with the whole like Nala Ray, like she calls herself a Christian, but bro, like this whole thing is like God works in mysterious ways. Like that's the same thing of because he said so. And that's why like there's a lot of people that will call themselves Christian, but they still have the exact same mentality of the wokies or the lefties. Like that tyrant script of because I said so. That like if you want to identify someone who's like a Christian with that same tyrant mentality is because God said so, or God works in mysterious ways, like that kind of like I don't even know if I should call it lazy argumentation because it's not even an argument. It's just pure tyranny. It's because they said so. You know what I mean? This is why like justification, justice, just. It's like justify has to be reasonable. You have to implore logic. You have to implore the practical, you know?
That's the case I would make for why I think Christians should be in charge of basically everything. Is that the outcomes are still going to be best for even people who aren't Christians. Now, maybe they don't like that, but so what? I don't like their view either. And I think Christians...
Who wouldn't like that? Oh my God, this is the thing as well. Like these atheists that will argue against an outcome that's objectively better for them. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. This is why I say, like, the only thing that, like, this is why I keep saying Zeus is coming back, boys.
should be in charge, and they have no objection because they have no moral facts. So who cares? It comes down to, like you said, at the very beginning of the conversation, we'll circle it all the way back. It comes down to who has the force. Well, it's going to be the ideology in charge who has the force. So is it going to be mine? Or is it going to be yours? Is it going to be the commies? Who's it going to be? And that's what I think the state of actual world affairs and politics is now. It's like a race to the top. Who gets there first? I don't know if it's depressing. Like, it's almost like may the best man win, right? May the best ideology win. I don't know if it's depressing.
Do you not think all government is fundamentally, even in dictatorships, is about power sharing? What you're talking about is dominance by one group over everybody else because we've got a better view, right? Yeah. That's what's depressing to me.
Why is that depressing?
Because, like I say, in most societies, there's a recognition. It might be tribal societies. There's the Pashtuns and the blah, blah, blahs, right? The countries that do well are the countries where those different interests are regulated through some kind of peacemaking mechanism at the level of politics. That's what politics is for, really, right? Whereas the country...
it doesn't need to be exclusionary, though. Just because one particular ideology holds the brackets of most of the power doesn't mean that it has to be exclusive or that it can't in some way accommodate other sections of society.
Well, how are you going to accommodate the population of San Francisco when you're in charge?
Well, I mean, tell me, how would San Francisco like die off if you stop letting gays get married there? It's not going to.
I mean, that's all they do, from what I could tell when we're in San
They don't
Francisco.
get married there. They just do a lot of gay shit there, right? But they're not. They're not.
I didn't observe that directly.
Yeah,
but
but
I've heard that.
marriage is not the big thing in San Francisco. But
You
look,
see what I'm saying,
yeah, but I
right?
can point to in
Because you would outlaw homosexuality. I'm guessing.
sure. Well, I know I'd outlaw homosexual marriage.
But not but isn't homosexuality wrong also?
Sure, it's immoral.
So
but
why wouldn't you outlaw?
You don't need to necessarily always place a law in against something which is immoral. It's not always conducive to the society to do that.
That's fair.
So, for instance, I would say for homosexuality, you're not going to jail, right? None of this type of thing. But there doesn't need to be any glorification, right? You're not going to get married. Nobody's going to bust in your bedroom and tell you what's what, right? But there's not going to be any rainbow flags in the White House either. There's not going to be any pro-gay government propaganda anywhere.
Does that not go against the First Amendment?
Well, I think that would be the most important aspect of the First Amendment, to say that the government's not going to propagandize towards one ideology or the other. Isn't that the whole point of secularism? The second they put the rainbow flags up on the White House.
What about
but
Christian? Yeah.
What about it?
Should that be in public communication?
Well, so in this particular case, I do think it should be, yes.
But you just said the First
Absolutely.
Amendment is about no propaganda.
Right. Well, his argument to me is, wouldn't it be against the First Amendment to outlaw rainbow flags? Right? I say no. That wouldn't be against the First Amendment. That would be more in line with.
So
the
wouldn't
First
it be
Amendment.
wouldn't it be compliant with the First Amendment to outline crucifixes?
You wouldn't
across-
necessarily need to even promote crosses or crucifixes. But what you could do is you could promote things like value structures. So let me give you an example of this. You're driving down the street, you look over to the right, and there's billboards. You've seen this a million times, right? What if the billboards had things like family, right? Mom, and it showed a mommy and a daddy and the kids, right?
Controversial.
And yeah, exactly. And the push was towards the ideas of normalcy. The push was towards the idea of, this is what we want to see in society. What if tax breaks went to married people, right? What if we drastically increase this to the point like some Eastern European countries have done, which is help their birth rates, where it's like, okay, you have 3 kids, you don't have to pay taxes anymore.
Oh, sign me up for that.
Yeah. You don't have to.
But you don't have to be Christian to pursue that. You could be a secularist politician and promote all those things.
Sure, but under a secular view, why do we need to have a domestic increased population anyway? They can just import who they want. And that's what they did in your country.
I mean,
That's what they do in my country.
I can give you lots of secular arguments for why having a bigger population is better and having more.
Yeah, but why
children
not
is better.
import it?
Why not import it? Because you get issues with integration, cultural compatibility.
Unless you import so many of them that the original culture's replaced.
Well, you don't know who you're importing. And also, the argument for tradition, it's actually one of the interesting differences. I mean, we had Dr. David Starkey explain this. I don't remember if it was on our show or not. The difference between American conservatism and British conservatism is British conservatism is about tradition and history, whereas American conservatism is about religion and values. So you could argue for the preservation of a society or the multiplication of an existing culture through time from a non-religious point of view, which is like, what we have is good by definition, a priori, because that's what it is. It's our country, it's our society. We want to make more of that.
So it's good because it's good?
It's good because we are already here, right? It's good because where we are is a product of where we've come from, and where we are, we like ourselves, right?
But then you can't argue against mass migration because it's just, what you're saying is just a tautology. This is good because it's good, and that's good.
This is good because we've been given, okay, if my dad gives me a watch, right? It's not necessarily the watch and its unique qualities that make it special. It's the fact that I got it from my dad. So the culture that we got from our ancestors is worth valuing because we got it from our ancestors, because it's where we've come to as a civilization.
But that's, again, it's a tautology.
Why?
Because what you're saying is, because I got this from my ancestors, it's good. What
Yeah.
makes that good? Because I got that from my ancestors.
That's exactly what I'm
And
saying.
that's tautology. So then
It
what
isn't-
you're doing is you're pointing to the identification of the thing as being the thing, right? Which makes the thing the thing.
I get what you're saying, but I think you're missing my
So then I
point.
say, well, mass migration is good. Why is it good? Well, because it's good.
No, but
Yeah, and it's just basically like tribalism and all this kind of shit. It's that same mentality. Cycles. We draw on cycles here. But when you base it in truth, and this is why, like, I had the legendary debate versus the legendary debater, Rob Noor, where he says like your morality subjective, and it's like, no, like I view morality as objective, the same way Plato would argue with that all truth can be grounded, through reason. The same thing for morality. All morality can be grounded through reason. You can provide logical argumentation why one ought or ought not do such a thing. Do you know what I mean? And you can test it by going, this is the Kant way, by doing the max and the minimum I mean, applied to the individual, then applied en masse to also, for example, like homosexuality. If everyone was to be homosexuality, if we were to maximize the goodness of homosexuality and everybody became homosexual, well, then we'd basically kill ourselves. You know what I mean? Ergo, it is not a moral choice to make. Simples. Simples. You know what I'm saying? But when you live in a tyranny, you're not allowed to say shit like that. You're not allowed to talk about truth. You know what I mean? And also welcome in all the Raiders from Kieran. Let me play the clip. Welcome in, sir. Welcome in. Kieran's just waiting for a mic.
What's going on? I'm just waiting for a mate.
G'day, mate. Welcome in, folks. Like I said, this is a beautiful interview with Andrew Wilson where he triggers trigonometry because he points out that essentially y'all have been taking a bunch of tyrannical arguments and just granting them to be true because I said so. That is the argument of the tyrant. And if those are the rules, then we're just going to out-tyrant you, and then it comes down to force doctrine, and we got bigger guns. So, it is what it is. Now, that being said, the system that Andrew wants to put in place actually is a system built on reason, which is why it goes to aristocracy and to the philosopher kings. That these people are going to rule based on reason, not their own subjectivity, not their own whim. That is the difference between aristocracy and the tyranny. Read some Plato.
I think what I'm saying is, if you take the watch example that I gave you, my dad gave me a watch, right?
Yeah.
There is a sentimental value to that. Why is that? Well, it's connected to the passing down from generation to generation. Why is that important? Well,
But it doesn't make it good, Constantine. It does not make it good. And the only way that you can have good is if you have truth. What comes from truth? Reason. Reason shall prevail. Di favore, Constantine.
it's kind of, I mean, you might not agree with this, but from an evolutionary perspective, the point of life is to recreate itself. And you'd probably say that's tautology if the point of something is
Well,
to
no,
ignore.
I mean, again, so now we're getting a worldview, right? I totally agree with you. The primary edict from an evolutionary standpoint is reproduction.
Right.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
So that's why mass immigration is not good. Because you're not reproducing your culture, you're bringing in a foreign culture.
Why can't you reproduce your culture with mass migration?
Because it doesn't work in practice, clearly.
Let me give
Because
you,
people don't
let me
integrate.
give you the counter.
Okay.
Are the people that you're importing generally more or less traditional than you?
Traditional to their tradition, yes.
Okay. Do they usually, do their women get pregnant younger than your women?
Yes.
Well, then that seems like it's really good for reproduction.
Of their culture,
Of
not
yours?
of ours.
Well, it's culture.
If they
maybe
don't,
not.
if they
But
don't
you wanna
integrate into our
reproduce-
culture, they're not reproducing our culture.
But you want to reproduce your genetics, right?
From an evolutionary perspective, sure.
Why can't you do it with them?
Because culture matters,
Okay, right. But
and our culture's better.
But you said the primary edict's reproduction,
Yeah.
not reproduction of culture.
No, but it's like saying you said the primary edict of reproduction, so why didn't you adopt kids? Well, no, I want to have my own kids. That's what I'm saying.
But that would be reproduction. You reproducing your genes.
Yes.
You adopting kids, not you
Is
reproducing.
not
your genes.
reproducing, just like
But
mass immigration.
culture itself, the idea of it's an externalized like philosophical concept, or it's a concept of the mind.
Yes.
Right? You would agree
Yes.
with that?
Sure.
You're not reproducing that. You're reproducing your genes. That would be the evolutionary view. And
Sure.
so what the evolutionist progressives would say is like, this is the best way for you to reproduce your genes, because you can bring in a bunch of women who you can breed with younger, so they're going to have more of your children.
But that isn't what's happening. You're important people who bring their own culture with their own family structure, and they're reproducing that
Look,
culture.
I'm not arguing this. Right? I'm 100,000% with you.
Yeah.
If I were in charge, if I was king of the UK tomorrow, monarch tomorrow,
Yeah.
I would close the gates of immigration immediately and give Tommy Robinson a badge and be like, good job, man. You did the best you could with what you had. But the thing is like, I guess what I'm getting at, before we get into too many reductios,
Sure.
I'm just trying to point this out.
Yeah.
That what you're arguing, you see how what we just did is we took a fact and we're like vibing over it. But now I've introduced some philosophy to it. And so now I'm asking about the grounding. What is the grounding? What is the thing under the pillar?
I think actually we were both talking about the philosophy.
Yes.
You're
And this might seem very minor, but see the way Andrew said, it's like now I'm adding some philosophy to it, right? If he had said theology or some like religion or some Christianity to it, you not that you lose the argument, but the argument gets weakened. And then it's like, oh, then why should we believe your religion over the other one? But once you ground it in philosophy, PhD, what does PhD stand for? When you go to college, the best thing you can get is a PhD. You study for your PhD. A PhD in, like, let's say, mathematics, a PhD in biology, it's all philosophy, a doctorate of philosophy in mathematics, a doctorate of philosophy in biology. It all comes down to the philosophy. And this is what I was pointing out in that debate, was that, like, when you ground, sorry, not when you ground it, you can put a stipulation in the Constitution for all the congressmen and all this kind of stuff that will effectively wipe out all atheists and moral relativists, not just the people themselves, but the actual ideology, by saying that this is not valid argumentation. By being able to ground it in supreme being philosophically, that's not a religious test, which means it does not go against the Fifth and the First Amendments. It's a beautiful argument.
Argument is, from a secular perspective, or from a perspective that's not aligned with yours, you can't argue against mass immigration. I thought I gave you some pretty compelling arguments from a secular perspective against mass immigration.
You can argue it. Okay, what I'm saying to you is that if everything that you're arguing is just coming from a me perspective, all morality is just dependent on stance, then even if these people are doing something you consider dumb, it's not immoral. How can it be immoral, or how can it be wrong for them to do that? How? And this is a question when you reduce to the ethical purview. I realized a long time ago, Christians can basically do whatever the fuck we want to secular atheists, progressives, because
what happens to treating others as you would like to be treated?
Well, so you're going to bank on the benevolence of my view?
No, that's the follow. But I should, because you're a Christian.
Right. So if you're going to bank on the benevolence of my view, are you ceding that my view is the right one? Because if it's not,
no, but I'm saying benevolence is an inherent part of being a Christian.
So, but if you have a foundation of just stance dependence for all of your moral claims, right? Then even if I violated this and was a complete hypocrite and actually just verbally just paid it lip service for the purpose of controlling your mind, you can't tell me why that's wrong. You can't really point to it and be like, that's immoral, because there are no moral facts.
Yeah. But, okay, but that being the case, but what we're talking about is, you're saying that you want your ideology to dominate.
Yes.
Effectively.
Yes.
Is that a Christian way of doing things?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I mean, if we want to look back through human history, we start with the Byzantine Empire, if you want to.
No, but
massive Orthodox Empire. We can talk about the naming of kings by God himself. We can dive right into the lineage of the King of Kings, if you want to. The thing is that I'm not here advocating for a monarch. What I'm saying is that society is better off dominated by Christians than dominated by non-Christians. And if you can point to me a society where that's not true, I'm all ears.
Yeah. And what do you mean by dominated? Because a lot of people hear that word and go, whoa, that sounds authoritarian.
The social, political climate, well, there is some authoritarianism to it, I suppose, but I just think there's authoritarianism to each ideology which exists, including liberal ideology. It's just authoritarianism now by direct democracy. So it's like, I suppose Christians might come in and say some things that are pretty controversial. They might be like, no, gays can't get married. Prostitution's illegal. No more pornography, right? Blasphemy. Let's be a little more chill on that, right? Maybe they'll put in some things like that. Tell me how society's worse. Like, how's society worse because 18-year-olds can't show their asshole on OnlyFans? Like, I honestly want to hear, how's it worse? Like, it seems to me like by every metric, it's way better, right? And the people arguing against it are like, well, we don't want totalitarianism. That's totalitarianism? I'll tell you what I saw as totalitarianism was COVID checkpoints, potential vaccine mandates, communications going through Facebook and the government to identify people who wouldn't wear them.
But I'd even go one step further, right? From what Andrew's saying, we don't want totalitarianism. They accuse you of being the tyrant, the tyrannical Nazis and all this kind of shit. But they are the ones that are using the tyrant's words. Because I said so is the tyrant. Whenever someone shows up and says, we're doing this because I said so, boys and girls, that is the fucking tyrant. That is the slave owner. Do you know what I mean? These socialists don't got any reason in their argumentation. It's simply because I said so. Things would be better if I was the one leading, if I was the tyrant. Because I said so.
Mask. That seems like a lot more of this totalitarianism, fascism thing than like, oh, sorry, you're 18, you can't put your asshole all over the internet. Sorry. It's like, what? At some point, maybe we can introduce rationality back into the scheme here, right? It's like, it's not you do whatever the fuck you want or it's totalitarianism. That's not how it works. It works like this. We're a nation of laws, and laws are governed by ethics. Like it or not, all laws are informed by a person's ethical worldview. So which ethical worldview you want to make the laws? The people.
And again, I'll go one step further. Society is governed by its laws or its ethics. That itself is justified, that itself is justified by reason. Ergo, if they deny reason, if they are to use my body, my choice, because I said so, that shit, they are by definition being unreasonable. Hence, you should not treat them reasonably. This is the paradox of intolerance or tolerance. Paradox of tolerance. If you tolerate the intolerant, then you are by definition intolerant.
People want 18-year-old girls to put their assholes on OnlyFans, or the people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
Which ones would you prefer make the laws of your nation?
But isn't that just quite a simplistic way of looking at it? For instance, if you look at literature, we had Christians saying certain books shouldn't be published. For instance, Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence, a classic of English literature. They didn't want that to be published. They were bowdlerizing Shakespeare. But surely you're a freedom of speech guy, aren't you?
I mean, to an extent, there's no. So here's my view on rights. What is a right? Let's start with that. What is it?
It does.
Well, it's a social construction that we made the fuck up. That's what a right is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something else other than that, tell me what it is. Where is it? I can't see it, touch it, taste it.
So it's the
smell it.
social construction that you have a right not to be forced to wear a mask.
Yeah. Why? What else would it be?
Okay, fine.
Yeah. Like
so where's this going? What's your argument?
Well, the argument is like rights are made up. Here's what's actually true. What's actually true is you have a right to do whatever you can do within the purview of force, and that's it. You have rights because people use force to ensure that you have rights.
Mm-hmm.
And the second people don't ensure that there's force used so that you have rights, you don't have them anymore. But the secularist, or in this case, not really the secularist, but the atheist mind or the non-religious mind, they can't ground rights in anything. They made them up. So they don't come from God. They just made them up.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're saying is that we just make this shit up and somehow we're just all going to adhere to it, even though there's no overarching real moral duty to do so. Where does it come from? Nowhere. So rights don't even exist. You can't taste them, can't touch them, can't smell them, right? They're just products of the mind.
But come back to me about the D.H. Lawrence bowdlerizing Shakespeare point.
Yeah.
And you clutched your heart as if you were clutching pearls in a kind of mocking way, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you feel that?
Who gives a shit?
I give a shit.
Well, okay, great. Ground it. Ground why I shouldn't outlaw that book. Why is it immoral for me to do that? Why?
Because you are American. You believe in the First Amendment. You believe in freedom of speech.
So you're going to appeal to my morals? So from your view, why is it immoral for me to do that? Why?
Why is it immoral for you to do that?
Yeah.
Because...
And this is why the only person who can actually genuinely get this conversation back on track, or to actually provide some semblance of a counter to Andrew, would be a deist. But even a deist would stand with Andrew by saying, yeah, we need Christianity. So even like the only person who could counter the tyranny thing by saying you cannot reason with unreason, ergo you must have reason. Like the counter that Andrew's basically is kind of daring trigonometry here to do. As soon as they do that, as soon as you do that, like the deist would be like, yeah, like we accept the reason, and then it goes to, okay, well then out of all the ethical worldviews in terms of like religions and philosophy and all that stuff, which one is the most ethical or produce the best outcome? Christianity, baby. All all roads lead to Rome? In the end, we win, I believe, is the expression. You know what I mean? Can't reason with a tyrant. You have to say, okay, you're not allowed at the table. You're not allowed to have the conversation. We cannot tolerate intolerance.
I believe that artistic creation is one of the ways that the human being expresses itself.
Makes sense to me. Notice how you caveated that with I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't believe that. Now what? Now where are we?
Well, that's why we have democracy, so we can adjudicate this, right?
So again, now we're just back to outsource. So as long as I can democratically convince enough people to outlaw that book, yeah.
Well, I get, but that's kind of unavoidable, isn't it? Like if you live in a society where 99 out of 100 people believe that something should be X and you believe Y, I mean, logically speaking, you're going to end up in a society that outlaws X.
You would end up in a society which outlawed X, but that doesn't mean that's right.
No, I agree.
Or wrong, right?
But then ultimately you have a choice of whether you choose to live in that society or not, right?
To an extent.
Yeah.
I mean, to some extent, maybe you have some control over that. But I guess the point I'm making to you is not that I would outlaw this book, right? The point that I'm making to you is that you don't have any justification for me not to. Like, who cares? Oh, you believe that? So
Do you-
I believe different. What now? What's the media? What, like, what is the threshold breaker? Well, now we're just going to appeal to a majority again.
How do we justify, gentlemen? It should be reason, logic, and the empirical. But Constantine nor the other dude seems as though they actually... Do they even know what justify means? Por favore. Por favore, chatta.
Well, if
What's
that's the case, then if I appeal to the majority to outlaw the book, bye-bye book.
Andrew, I'm not trying to argue with you for the sake of argument. It's a great, really enjoyable
Yeah.
conversation, actually. I appreciate the way that you stay calm and on the point, but I'm not clear what point you're trying to make here, particularly with this Shakespeare thing. Like,
Rights or force? That's my point.
no, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in practice,
It's either reason, which means we make logical, consistent, valid, sound argumentation, or we go to who has the biggest stick in the room. Those are the two options, gentlemen. And if you're not able to make reasonable argumentation or justification, well, then I guess you need to shut the fuck up. We got a clip for that one too, ladies and gentlemen.
Or, here's another idea that's going to be very controversial. You could shut the fuck up.
That's basically the way it's going to be. You know what I mean? You need to provide justification.
that is what happens. But what are you trying
It's
to say?
not ultimately in practice what happens even. It's even philosophically the case
Fine.
from the non-Christian view. When you say things like, don't you appeal to the First Amendment or this right, right? That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Don't you appeal to this right? This right, we need to have the adult conversation, doesn't even exist. It's just a social construction that we made up and it was pinned on a piece of paper and we pretend that it's something we actually adhere to. But it's really not.
Well,
violate it constantly. I don't care.
You argue about it, and that's why you have a judiciary system to adjudicate whether
Sure.
you are right. But I mean, it's not just some random people wrote it down. It's the founders of your country wrote it down because they were trying to set a set of rules for this society to operate by in order to fulfill what they thought would be a vision of a new country that would be a good one.
One thing that doesn't get talked about enough is how I've spoken sides. It's also
And it won't be talked about this time, Francis.
What they wrote down was based on a massive compromise because beforehand they had the Articles of Confederation, and the Articles of Confederation made each little kind of state, which wasn't a state even really then, their own nations, and didn't work out very well because they couldn't regulate trade or raise armies or things like this. So what they did via the compromise was they had a 10th Amendment. Now, the 10th Amendment says that all the rights that are not given to the federal government are given to the states prospectively. And at our founding, almost every single state had a state religion. Almost all of them.
Well, of course, and they were religious people.
And they continue to have them.
And as John Adams said, Constitution is wholly inadequate for people that ain't moral or religious. Wholly inadequate, son. Meaning, if you're a moral relativist or an atheist, gotta get your ass out of office, boy. This is Jesus' country.
I mean, clear up until there was an interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which was, widely viewed as being unconstitutional to this day. States were always allowed to have their own religion and put in their own religious practices, and those practices were to be adhered to if you wanted to hold office, if you wanted to swear oaths, if you wanted to do things like this. That was part and parcel of American society and the way that we did things. Now that has changed as progressives have kind of demonized the whole idea that, that's against the First Amendment. And it's like, well, no, it ain't. And it was part of the initial compromise anyway. When we're talking about the idea of rights, to get this back to the idea of rights, right? Why is it that states don't have the right to do that? Well, it's because there's an interpretation of an amendment, and then they said, well, you no longer have the right to have your own religions inside of these states. That's what they did. I was like, and who has the force? They do. So everything really comes down, when you're talking about rights, to the ideas of force. And the reason that that's so important to understand is because this republic, when we moved it towards a direct democracy, the reason that that's going to fail is because people don't understand this concept that rights only exist as some kind of like bizarre social construct if they're not grounded in God. How does a secular society uphold rights? How?
But how do you uphold your right not to have to wear a mask in the middle of a pandemic through scripture or God?
You would still utilize it through force.
Right.
The scripture doesn't prevent you from utilizing force. Christian, with this idea of like Christian pacifism and Christians being pussies, I don't know where that came from.
Britain, I think.
Boy, that was never.
So what about the teachings of Jesus Christ?
Which ones? Which ones do you want to dive into?
Well, I was raised as Catholic, so I'm not as well versed in scripture as you. When he was on the cross, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do.
Of course. And you should forgive people. I absolutely agree with that. I may forgive a man who attempted to rape my wife, but I'm going to kill him in the attempt. Right? Like, I don't, which thing's contradictory here? It's like, I can forgive my enemies, but that doesn't mean I need to let them crush me. I can forgive people who've done me wrong. Doesn't mean I need to let them do me more wrong. I can forgive people for doing horrible acts against me. It doesn't mean I need to continue to let them do horrible acts against me. Christian ethics has been widely bastardized by progressive leftists as being some kind of like hippie religion. It is definitely not, and never has been, and I don't know where that came from. Yes, it's true the teachings of Jesus Christ are very heavy on loving your neighbor and understanding forgiveness and understanding the mode of sin, and that most people are going to engage in sin, so we need the forgiveness of Jesus Christ for that. That's true. But it's not a pacifistic religion, and it never has been Jesus told one of his disciples to sell a cloak and buy a sword. But these were not pacifists. Jesus ran money changers out of a temple that with a braided cord that he made out of leather and whipped them out of the temple. So, like, I don't know where the idea of pacifism came from. He called them serpents. He called people serpents, whitewashed tombs. He called them all sorts of names. These were killable offenses in his day.
I don't know enough about scripture.
Jesus went into the temple, started flipping fucking tables, bro. You know what I mean? Jesus ain't no fucking hippie. I can tell you that. Hide that window behind your picture. Was it because I was changing the? Yeah, I was changing the speed. Like I said, we caught up, so we should be Gucci, or we should be kind of thereabouts in terms of timing. So we should kind of wrap up for the 3-hour mark. We got Hi from OK USA. Welcome in. Hi from Alabama. Materville, Tennessee. Heavy on neighbor loving. But Andrew, like I said, like makes a starter point here. Is that like this Constitution was made, and these states had their own religions, right? So this whole thing of like, oh, it goes against the Constitution. No motherfucking don't. You know what I mean? Like, we have to listen to these motherfuckers say that like abortion's actually pro-Constitution, and then like actually having guns is against the Constitution. That's the argumentation we've gotten to. Like, these motherfuckers are literally contradicting the words that you read. This is why I say, like, we're in the middle of tyranny, boys. And we're on the precipice of winning. Turning this bitch into an aristocracy. We're philosopher kings and shit, man. Gonna be a good one, boys. Gonna be a good one.
To challenge you, but it's interesting what you said. But what I wanted to get back to, so this idea of bowdlerizing Shakespeare, cancelling books, etc. I guess for me, now thinking about it, is the reason that it's not good is that you begin to silence ideas. And what Christianity did, and not solely Christianity, but other religions did, is it silenced scientists and people making breakthrough in the scientific fields. And I guess the ultimate example is people be worrying that essentially in schools is we'd be back to teaching creationism, for example, if certain Christians were in charge and presenting creationism as fact.
Why couldn't you just have a compromise there where you said, okay, you can learn either or you can learn neither? That should be up to the parents, don't you think? The education standards for their kids. Why should that be up to the state? Do you think the state should have control over that? Or do you think the parents should? So if the parents say, yeah, you know, I don't really want them to learn evolution, why can't they opt them out?
Because evolution has been proven to be scientifically correct.
That's not your business what people do with their kids' education. That's their business, right?
Okay, well then why can't I raise my child to be a jihadist?
So you're going to raise your kid to blow people up?
No, but well, why not? I mean, if you say it's not your business, then it's not your business.
Yeah, well, I mean, can you stop parents from raising their kids to be a jihadist?
You can.
How?
You can make sure that within the confines of a school that they're not learning it. We have had schools in the UK where people have been there's Islamist values.
Bro,
and those-
that's the most ridiculous thing, that like these cunts were literally found out that they were actually fucking pushing like jihadists and trying to get the kids to become jihadists and all that stuff in a British school. In a British school, and then they do the whole thing of like, oh look, Israel bombed the school in Tehran, and it's like, bro, this is what they were doing in a fucking British school. What the fuck do you think they were doing in the Iranian schools? Can we have a bit of cop on? Do you know what I mean? But it's this whole like gaslighting shit that like we have to like prove 100% empirical, 100% like undisputed fucking thing, and then they'll still say, but I still hate Trump anyways. And you're just like, what? Why are we even engaging with these cunts? Why can't we just lock these cunts up into the fucking wacko bin? You know what I mean? There you go. Take your fucking antidepressants and fuck off into that room with the 4 padded walls. Holy fucking shit. Do you know what I mean? Make asylums great again.
schools have been closed down.
Okay, so why is it in school that you're supposed to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and you're supposed to learn science as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying, well, this is a scientific fact, so kids need to learn it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So parents say, well, I dispute this fact, right? I'm not going to teach my kid evolution. How does that hamstring the kid exactly? Like what about that's going to hamstring the child?
What's going to happen? Well, maybe they want to be a scientist. Maybe the way that they see the world, you're actually taking out a fundamental part of their understanding of the world and how it works.
That's a strictly materialistic view, and it's silly.
Is it?
What about the ideas of metaphysical accounting for metaphysical things, like the laws that are immaterial, laws of logic, things like this?
I think they should be taught in school as well.
I don't understand. They're not proven facts. Even though you believe in them, they're not proven facts, but you still want them taught in school?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
the Bible's not a proven fact, and you want that taught in school?
Yeah, I believe you should learn the Bible as
Great.
part of a religious studies education.
Alhamdulillah, Habibi. You gotta speak to the British in their native language. You know what I mean? Sometimes they don't fully understand or grasp English. You have to refer to them in their native language of Arabic. Nate says, argument against importation of conflict in cultures, and Mr. Centrist doesn't even recognize he did it, but like that's why he's trying to he's grasping, or he's throwing out jihadis because he knows that Andrew's going to be against that. But like I said, he kind of shot himself in the foot, where it's like, bro, that's currently taking place in British schools. Are you sure you want to keep continuing on with the status quo of diversity is our strength, DEI is our strength? Why is all these explosions happening at random places throughout the city? Why are the people getting run over at Christmas markets? Why are we not even allowed to call it Christmas anymore? You know what I mean? Don't ask those questions. Christianity, bad, apparently. Islam, good. Get the fuck on the boat, Muhammad. Morning, Stacy. Who watch video says, I wish Andrew would have pushed back on the evolution. Has been a proven statement. Well, they even said it was scientific. But the evolution doesn't even follow the scientific method. You know what I mean? And even, like, one could argue that evolution proves God. Is evolution not constant change? How can change be constant without a constant giver? Bars. Real deal. Phil McGill says, "Yup, evil Lutein is deception. Evolution. Oh, evolution. I see what you're doing there. I see what you're doing. Jesus to obey to. Jesus to obey to. I have a feeling there's another half a sentence missing there. But hey, it is what it is. Work is always good, brother. Hey, my man. And shout out to Just Me Stacy with $2 says, cheers and thank you for the show, my friend. My pleasure, Stacy. My pleasure. When we have such great videos like this of our boy Andrew Wilson to review, is it even work at this stage? Is it even work? It feels more like leisure, you know?
Well, that's fantastic. Great. Okay, here's my compromise.
Because now I tell you
can
what.
teach evolution.
Hold on, let him finish.
You can teach evolution, or you can teach creationism, or you can teach both, and parents can have them have the kids do both or do neither, which is exactly what I said before. You say same thing. They should teach both.
No,
They're
no,
both
no, 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 no.
contradictory.
That's not what I was saying. I was saying that you should teach evolution because it has been scientifically proven, but you should also teach the Bible, and you say this is what Christians believe, and it's up to you whether you believe it or not.
Okay. So then I don't understand why. So let me ask it a different way. Is it the case that if you're a religious Christian, that your kid should have to sit through sex education hearing about homosexual sex?
They should have to hearing about homosexual sex? No, they shouldn't. But I believe that.
Why not?
Why
Oh,
not?
hold on, let me finish. I think the point, there's an important distinction here between different types of sex education. Showing kids porn, as some of your schools do, it shouldn't happen irrespective of whether it's sexual, homosexual, whatever, straight, whatever. Yep, so that's an important distinction.
Well, you have to show them porn. Like, I remember when I went through sex ed, they definitely showed the naked human body, walked through, showed you these are what breasts are, these are what ovaries are, this is what this is, this is what this is where babies come from. Didn't appear overtly, it wasn't pornographic.
Right.
No worries, Stacy. Always appreciated, never expected. Also, Abe says Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, all good conversations around bonfire laws surrounding the activity. Well, how come all those other religions always flock towards Christian nations or nations that were built by Christian ethics or follow Christian ethics? Like, why are we not allowed to point out that clearly there's one ideology that seems to be more productive than the others? You know what I mean? Like, you could make the case for Judaism because, like, the Jews would say, "Oh, well, you know, like Judaism came first and then Christianity," but you know, after World War II, it was the Christians that helped set up Israel. So, and they did copy a lot of stuff with the way the setup that America was set up. So, you know what I mean? I'm just saying. You know what I mean? So, like I said, like, if I was to be as generous as possible, we could branch it out to Judeo-Christian, maybe, but ain't no Christians flocking to Muslim countries. That is a fact. Okay? It's like the same thing when you mention the average IQ of Americans versus the average IQ of Somalians. All of a sudden, everybody goes quiet, and no one wants to talk about facts. You know?
Right? You do the same exact thing with homosexuality, right? But why do you think that religious fundamentalists should be able to opt their kids out of that?
I don't believe that we should be teaching. I think sex ed should be about I think sex ed should primarily be about safety, actually.
That's it?
Primarily be about safety, and also about how the biological functions work when you have children, etc.
So you don't want it taught in school at all?
What, sex ed?
Yeah.
Yes.
You do?
Yes, I
Okay,
do.
great. So then why do you want the parents' ability to tell their teachers, hey, I want to opt my kid out of this? If you're going to be talking about gay sex, you're going to be talking about this, you're going to be talking about that. I want to opt them out of that.
Right. I don't think you should include gay sex in the curriculum.
Why though?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I believe
Because it's
I believe
gay.
that it actually could offend religious minorities.
Oh.
Okay.
Just
And-
like creationism, right?
Right? No, not like
Same.
creation. Not like
It's the
like
same.
Darwin. No, but when you have evolutionary, that is a scientific fact. That is a scientific.
I actually wouldn't go quite that far. It's a scientific theory that's currently accepted. But look,
I've actually, funny enough, this actually came up in this interview. I've actually been working on my own sort of sex education for kids, but it's mainly just to teach them about the dangers of certain sexualities. Here's a short clip of the demo that I have. Let me know your thoughts, chat.
One of the things they do is called anal leaking, where a man's anus is leaked like this by the other person, like ice cream. And then what happens, even poo-poo comes out. The other poo-poo's out, and then they eat the poo-poo.
Now, obviously, I've outsourced a bit of the a few of the roles and all this kind of stuff. It's more like a worldwide project here. We're going to be recruiting in a lot of like cheap labor to actually get the message across. But I think it might actually work. You know? Like I said, it's scientific. We have laptops and everything to show the kids and all that kind of shit. We got Stammy. Stammy saying it's based. This is 100% serious, Stammy. Okay? We're being seriously serious, okay? You know? Let me know your thoughts on my sex ed. Because, like I said, safety is the important thing to me.
This is
The
actually,
distinction between theory and fact, I mean,
well,
Yeah.
this is actually, I mean, it's interesting because just so all of this will get condensed into clips on the internet where it's like this person destroyed that person, which is really not the angle of
Yeah.
conversation
No, not at
for
all.
us.
Yeah.
Really trying to explore the arguments. I mean, I would say a stronger version of your argument is, should parents be able to opt their children out of being taught that climate change is real, right? Because
You would say that.
because that's where you're going to get someone like Francis
Yeah.
or me to go, yeah, I think they should be able to opt out of that, right? Even though that's the scientifically accepted consensus.
well, I'm
Hold
not
on.
here for destruction.
Yeah, I know,
none of us are.
But let me come back to a point that I think Francis made that you haven't addressed, which I think is a strong argument. What about the jihadi thing? Like, should devout Muslim families be able to create schools according to this devolvement of religion to the states or whatever, where they teach that particular worldview?
No.
Because
I believe in Christian ethics as the dominant force in society. And since that's the case, I would tailor laws towards Christian ethics being the dominant force in society.
so there would be no schools that taught anything except Christian ethics.
No, it wouldn't be that they would teach nothing but Christian ethics, but we could definitely tailor laws against jihadist ethics, or definitely tailor laws against even importing Muslims at all. The hell are we importing Muslims here for anyway? We don't need them here. Never needed them here. Diversity is our strength. Has not been a strength having Muslims here.
And Socrates too, real deal. That's why these motherfuckers, like these atheists apparently, like these philosophical thinkers of the modern age on stuff. They never talk about fucking Plato, and Plato was the one that fucking was the main dude that put philosophy on the fucking map. The motherfuckers executed Socrates. Bunch of retards voted to kill Socrates. Same thing with Jesus as well. We'd rather have a mass murderer than a dude that spoke truth. And you guys are blackpilling at the moment? Motherfuckers, we're on the precipice of victory. Lock the fuck in. As Stammy says, we're locking in, baby. You know what I mean? But now you see why it has to be Christianity. Because if you just do it based on religious undertones, Muslims will come in and then they'll start pushing Sharia and saying, you can't infringe on my religious rights and all this kind of shit. That's why the First Amendment's a very dangerous amendment. You have to be very careful with your argumentation. You can't just do a religious argument. You have to base it in philosophy. And from there, it will lead you to Christianity. And like this is the whole thing as well, is that like fighting back against like a lot of these socialists and all this kind of shit by removing the aspect of charity to the state, which is how the socialists gain so much power. They basically do this false argumentation where they present it as though the government has to be the benefactor, the government has to be the charity, and then they mandate that charity through your taxes, through your income. So basically, they're just convincing you to become a slave. That's the main goal of the socialists, because they have the tyrant mentality. Because I said so. We need more taxes because I said so. Because the planet is heating up, or the planet's cooling down, or the climate changes. You know what I mean? The nanny state. They done it with the same thing as it will incentivize single motherhoods. We'll take the fathers out of the home. Get you dependent on the government. The government is the charity and all stuff. But you take away the government charity. That's not a job for the government to be charitable and all this kind of shit. Then all of a sudden, the importance for churches regains. Because the churches are still going to be charitable. See how it works? This is why in South America, Bukele and Milei, Argentina and what the fuck's the other one? Uruguay, I think it is. They're like, nah, fuck it. We're going to like basically afuera. put it down to the bare bones. And both of the countries are thriving.
The idea that that we can't tailor or craft legislation and laws around the things that our children learn, or at least what you can opt into and out of, let's just say for consistency's sake, sure. You could teach your kid, I guess, theoretically to be a jihadist, and there's nothing I can do about it. And there's nothing a secular state can do about it either, except not let them come in. And then it's really hard to train your kid to be a jihadist, right? Because you're not here.
Well, so from a policy level, this is kind of ultimately comes back to the final question, I suppose, of what is, do you call yourself a Christian nationalist? Is that your...
I would say Christian populist.
Okay.
Christian nationalism is often conflated with forms of ethno-nationalism. And people do use it as a cloak for ethno-nationalism.
Yeah.
I would fall more in line with what's called cultural nationalism.
Uh-huh.
You guys, I think, from watching your content, would fall more in line with probably civic nationalism. So cultural nationalism is talking about the glue which holds cultures together. And the ethno-nationalists obviously believe that's your race, right? Obviously, I think that race is not enough to hold a nation together. There has to be some kind of cultural glue, and that usually comes from religion. So all the laws that I can see seem to be informed by ethics, and those ethics seem to almost universally be informed by Christianity.
So you would you'd support mass migration from Christian countries?
No.
Why not?
Well, I don't understand. I want my domestic population to grow. So if I want to tailor the best outcomes for my society, then I want my domestic population to grow. I want those families to be very happy. I want them to have the biggest slice of that American dream, right? Because I'm Christian, but also a nationalist. So the idea here is nation first. Me importing a bunch of people from other countries, not putting my nation first, putting their nation first. So my list of priorities would be God, nation, right? Or I'm sorry, God, family, nation. So culture and borders are very important for the nation.
And so so you don't, you're not a Christian nationalist, cultural nationalist. So describe to me the America that you want. What does it look like? What are the...
You mean by tomorrow?
Well,
let's say I was king tomorrow.
Well, you seemed very keen on this idea, which I'm sure you're excited about. What I mean is, ultimately, you want to transform America into something that it used to be, or that you'd like it to be, or whatever. Let's not argue about that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's just say you want America to be a certain way. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. What does it look like once you've got to that destination? Once you've got to that perfect America, which represents your values as someone who's really interested in Christianity being the dominant force in society. What can you do? What you can? How is it different from what we have to?
So while I would say that there's this is a bit of like hypothetical utopianism,
of course,
as long as you're granting me that this is a bit of hypothetical utopianism. So let's say I was King Wilson tomorrow. I'm King Andrew Wilson, and my decrees and edicts go out to all of the land. First thing, mass migration, that's gone immediately. Next thing is focusing on domestic birth rates and domestic birth policies and trying to move America back to a one-income family. The best way to do that is to prioritize from the government level down that women do not defer their childbearing years for college, right? But rather you offer massive incentives to families for them to get married younger, right? Stay at home, have babies with their husband. And if you contract them from the workforce, wages are going to necessarily skyrocket. The second you begin contracting women from the workforce, wages are going to shoot through the roof, especially if you're not filling those roles with migrants. So those would be some of the very first policies that I would put in place. I'd ban porn, I'd ban gay marriage. I'd put in some kinds of laws which had dominion over the airwaves when it came to degeneracy, right? Meaning, I don't think you should turn on Fox or, Channel 32 and see naked women. I don't think that that's good for the public. I don't think it's particularly useful. I would probably outlaw smartphones, or put age restrictions on smartphones, probably till you were like 18 years old. There would be some pretty restrictive things that I would put in place, but it would also maximize human ethical flourishing, right? The idea here is like, why do kids need to be looking at smartphones and training their brain towards smartphones? It's been terrible for them.
No, we just did recorded an episode on it. Well, several actually. So I agree with you on that. And is it important to you that outcome is arrived at democratically? That like you persuade half the country that this is the way to be?
So ultimately, the views of what's best for the nation, that's what's going to be first and foremost in my brain, right? Yes, the religious aspect, it's always going to be God first, but from like the things that I can do something about, it's going to be from the national level. The nation that we have is a checks and balance based republic. So obviously I'm going to work within the confines of that in order to make as many compelling and convincing arguments and as many compelling and convincing things I can possibly do to move people towards this view. But remember, the problem with democracy, the big hole in it, is you can democratically remove it. So you can vote out democracy. It's built in right into democracy to be able to do that. And the most American thing you can do is to remove amendments and put in new amendments. We do it all the time, right?
And is that what you'd prefer? You don't want America to be a direct democracy?
No.
What would you like it to be?
I would like it to be what it used to be at the beginning, which is a stakeholder democracy at the very least.
What does that mean?
It means you're either going to have like one household voting, right? So that we're not dividing husbands and wives, because that's really stupid. Or it means that you're going to have some kind of stake in property, or perhaps 4 years of unpaid public service before you can vote. There has to be some skin in the game, in other words. I'd also raise the voting age, probably to 25, right? I think...
Would women be allowed to vote?
I mean, to at least the degree that men are, but I don't want men to vote for the most part either. I don't think it's a great idea.
But it would be equal between men and women in your view. Really? It doesn't sound like it. If you want a household, well, what I mean is, it sort of sounds like, well, forgive me if I'm misunderstanding this genuinely, you'd like people to get married and to vote as a household, which I imagine would kind of mean that the head of the family, which is the husband, would tend to decide that. And if a woman isn't married, presumably she wouldn't be getting a vote partly for that reason.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, what's wrong with that system? Sounds great.
I'm just interested in exploring. Well, it sounds great to you. I'm just interested in...
The thing is like, it's really hard. It's really difficult. When people think of things like, what's the argument against this? This is an immutable character. How could you argue that women shouldn't be able to vote or that men shouldn't be able to vote? It's like, well, at our founding, they couldn't. Women could not vote.
Well, at your founding, as you said yourself, you had slavery, right? So things do change over time.
Sure, but the thing is like...
Sometimes in a good direction.
Sure, and sometimes in a bad direction.
Oh, absolutely.
So the thing is like, the idea that they had there was that most men couldn't vote. There was no universal suffrage for men, including slaves, right? For the most part, were men. And women couldn't vote because most people weren't allowed to vote. Now, women, the arguments against women voting are pretty simple. And the idea is landholdership and force, right? Can women utilize force in order to maintain land? The answer is no. Generally, that takes men. So the biggest... if you're looking at feminism, for instance, you had the anti-suffragettes and then the suffragettes. But the anti-suffragettes arguments were way better. The argument was pretty simple. It just worked like this. You cannot erode or get rid of the patriarchy because you always have to appeal to it for your rights. And that's a fundamental truth. And since that's a fundamental truth, I've never seen a great reason why women should be able to vote. Because they can vote to send men to war that they themselves do not have to go fight. They are not beholden to the draft. Only men are. And they can say, well, you're not beholden to the draft, perhaps because you're too old for it, but you were beholden to the draft when you were not too old for it. So your time could have come.
We're at a strange moment where people are pouring their most private thoughts into AI. Health issues, business ideas, political opinions, things you wouldn't even tell some of your friends. And you're just meant to trust the power to accept your invitation state the power plan.
Where's the
things that
fucking-
are aware again is venice.ai/trigonometry.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Got a Jess Summer Stream still. God bless. God bless. Real deal. A nice Sammy says, if Andrew catered to his specific group for migration, would be no different than having other groups come to the country en masse. At that point, you might as well focus on globalism. Makes no sense. No, he's saying like that you're putting the nation first, right? And that you're putting like you're getting rid of this multiculturalism worldview. And that your culture is based on Christian ethics, is part of it, but it's also like, what is your language? Your language is English. What is your culture? It's a blend of, Germanic with a sprinkle of the romances. Romance meaning like from Roman, like the Romance languages like France, Italian, Greek. And then you had like that kind of like the mix of like the Celtic / Anglo and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? That's what like America was, and that's why like in terms of like the Mexican immigration, that's not as big of an issue as like what you're seeing, like this mass Somali, Pakistani immigration, like with Muslims and shit like that. That's a completely different religion, completely different language. See how different that culture is. Whereas at least with the like Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and English, like at least they speak the same language. You know what I mean? At least they have the same religion, more than likely. You know what I mean? So when you're looking at like this whole kind of like globalism thing, the reason why globalism is a bad thing is because it wants to equalize the powers and do this whole there's no culture better than any other. Whereas we can clearly point to like all these cultures, at least in modern day, they all stem from Christian ethics and they all still follow Christian ethics to some shape or degree. You even seen in this interview where they will constantly try to appeal to Andrew's ethics, Christian ethics, try and quote unquote win the argument. You know what I mean? We're saying leave a like, a sub, and hit the share button if you haven't already, with a little winky face. Keeps the clovers greener. Leprechaun told me so. True story. True story. I stand for saying AI bullshit. It is what it is. It is what it is, man. The fucking adverts, I understand Andrew's point. I was focusing on what the other guy said. I was being facetious. It is what it is. Because the guy said something about, would you want Christians to mass migrate? I get you. I'm just clarifying. We got to make sure that we flesh out all the points. You know what I mean, make sure that we have a full picture.
Could you not flip this argument the other way around and say women are able to vote, men are able to vote on things that affect women that don't affect men?
Like?
Well, all kinds of things. For example, their right to vote. I mean, among other things. But, things to do with sexual health, abortion, all kinds of things, right?
Well, I don't understand. Abortion does have to do with men.
Okay, fine. I mean, it does, but it has more to do with women because it affects them more directly. But lots of other things. I mean, men could pass a law that women have to wear a headscarf, for example, right? So our votes affect each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an argument to deny the other sex the vote.
Oh, I don't understand.
Your argument is women can vote to send men to war. And
no,
my
argument is it's called force doctrine. My argument reduces to this. If you always have to appeal to one sex for your rights, right, then why are you being imbued with the responsibility of that at all? Because women have to appeal to men for their rights, and anytime men want to take rights away from women, they can, like that. And there's not a damn thing women can do about it. And if you want proof of that, let me show you half the world. Anytime, collectively, men say women have no rights, they don't have any. And that's that. And there's not a damn thing that they can do about it. So the idea that they can erode the patriarchy or remove the patriarchy or in some way get away from the patriarchy to be strong, independent women is nonsense. They're just always appealing to the benevolence of men. Always. And so I don't even understand what the purpose is of the vote for women. What is it? We can literally, via force, take it whenever we want anyway. What is the point here?
Well, I would imagine the point is to include the voice of half the population, which is naturally set on different priorities to those of men. And since we live in a society which is half female, it would be worthwhile to include their perspective in how we make decisions.
Why does voting
because it affects them as much as it affects us.
Have you, let me ask you a question. Are you aware that in the United States, we abolished alcohol?
For a period of time. I've seen some movies about how that went.
Who got that amendment passed?
I don't know.
Women.
Okay. Oh, no. If you want to have an argument about our disagreements with how women choose to vote.
No.
There's not
they
much
couldn't vote.
Oh, I see. That's what you're saying. Okay.
They couldn't vote.
But
they still got that amendment passed.
Okay.
The idea that women did not have influence or do not have influence or don't have moral influence on society because they can't vote is stupid.
So what's wrong with formalizing that in the form of a vote?
Well, I just told you the very idea that women, well, like, let's start with this. Do you want women to be able to get drafted in the military?
I personally don't, no.
Why?
Why? Because I've never really thought about it, but it's just an instinctive reaction, actually. I'd have to think about the exact reason, but I just don't think combat is what men do, I guess. It's a very simplistic way of saying it. And
Sure.
there'll be women who, I can kick your ass, and there are women
Sure.
like that, right?
Agreed.
Uh,
But not generally.
what I am not against women serving in the military if that's what they choose to
Yeah,
do.
but what about the draft, though?
But I don't think they should be compelled to, no.
But men should?
I think in some circumstances, yes. Like when the survival of the country is at stake.
So women get a privilege men don't get?
Sure. Why
And
men
so-
get certain privileges
But
too,
so why do they have equal rights? No? What privileges? Name a single privilege men get that women don't have access to. What?
You mean legislative?
Anything. Like literally
What,
anything.
in life?
Any aspect, whether it be governmental, social, women have all the privilege.
All the privilege?
Oh, yeah. Hey, when the Titanic goes down, who gets on the lifeboat?
Yeah, but that's a very narrow context. Well, who dies in childbirth, right? Like, I mean, come on, we're different, and
Almost no women die in childbirth anymore.
Well, some still do.
Sure, but I mean,
Right.
some people die.
They're just like, I mean, there's probably more women that die in
child.
childbirth in America than people who die on the Titanic in the modern
Yeah,
age,
is
right?
childbirth avoidable? You just don't have sex, right?
No, but what I'm saying is there are outcomes that are better for men in life and for women, and that's a fundamental difference between men and women. It's
Yeah, I
reflective of
understand,
our
but I'm
different
talking
biology.
about privilege. What are any? Can you give me any privilege at all that men have that women don't? Whereas I can give you tons of privileges that women have that men don't. That's what I'm asking.
Privilege. Well, I mean, the privilege concept outside the legislative framework is a difficult one.
Even inside of it, I'm asking for both. Either, any, in fact.
I don't have the data on all this stuff, but I would assume there are contexts in which men are more likely to be employed for a certain thing because they're more likely to be perceived as authoritative, as leaders, things like that. Although that has changed with the kind of woke agenda of the last 10 years.
And it works both ways. Like, for instance, preschool teachers.
Yeah.
I would assume that people would vastly prefer that their
I
kid
would.
go to a woman, right?
Right.
So it seems like that privilege is striped across the board. So, like, what is the? Why is it that women get all of the equality, right? But also get all the privilege? That doesn't seem right to me. That seems like it's backwards. So, like, I'm still waiting to hear from anybody ever. What are these? What are these privileges men have over women versus what women have over men? So, if you can go and you can be drafted, you can be sent off to war, right? And women can't, but they can vote to send you off to war. How is that not something which fundamentally needs to be addressed immediately? That seems to me like it's completely lopsided and it's giving one class of people a significant privilege over another.
So if we allowed women to be drafted, you'd be happy with them having the vote?
Well, see, now we come into pragmatic problems, though. The reason that you said earlier, I'm against women being drafted, is because they can't really serve in combat roles. Only in support roles, which draftees of men would have to serve in combat roles. The reason women don't do well in combat roles is because, well, driving tanks is hard work. It takes muscles, and you gotta, run the shells, and you have to carry hundreds of pounds of equipment with you, and you have to do all of this type of thing. And generally speaking, women aren't equipped for it, which is why we've never had a female Navy SEAL to date, even though they've been trying for like 25 years. We still haven't had a single one. They can't do the job. Now, what people always do is point to outliers, right? Well, some women can do it. That's true. Some can,
Yeah.
but in general, they can't.
I guess, but when you vote for a government, you don't vote whether to go for war or not. It's the government that makes the decision. There's plenty of people who voted for Donald Trump and are absolutely disgusted that he's started a war with Iran.
I thought government was force. We all agreed on that, right? Government's force. Like, ultimately, that's what it reduces to. So you say you're voting for force, and you're voting for force use. Why does the United States have a massive military? Well, because we're going to use it. That's why we're going to use it. And why do we have a draft? Well, because we're going to use that too, and have used it. And so the thing is that a lot of what we're voting on is force. We're trying to protect our nation from all foreign threats, right? That's why we have this massive military. That's why we have a draft. That's why we have the potential for mass combat. That's why we entered into World War II, right? It's why we entered, and there was a draft then. And we're going to institute a draft at some point again, likely. It's more likely than not. At some point, we're going to do it. So the thing is like, why do women get exempt from that? And if it's the case that you don't want them exempt from that, why is it that they don't go right to the front lines then and battle it out, like draftees have at least the potential to? Well, that's a fundamental privilege that is not being addressed, right? And yet women have the vote. Doesn't seem like they care too much about men's rights, even though we're supposed to care about theirs. Seems like they have a lot of privilege in society.
Is that fair, Andrew? I think a lot of women care about men's rights, actually. Look, there's a vocal minority which say that they don't and they hate men. And look, we know those type of women. But let's be honest, a lot of women care about men's rights. They do.
Give me like 3 of the most prominent ones you can think of.
Who care about men's rights? Well, I'm trying to think now, but...
I mean, we've had feminists on the show who are feminists, like Louise Perry, for example. They're a different type of feminists to the idiots that you'd be spending your time arguing with, but the people who have a very sensible view of these things. Yeah, lots of people like that. By the way, coming back, not to change subject, but coming back to your point, I mean, one of the things that doesn't make a lot of sense to me is, for example, yes, it's true, men serve in combat roles and women don't. But women bear children and men don't. And there's a huge disadvantage in all sorts of societal outcomes from a materialistic career perspective to spending the time to bear the child and then to nurture that child, right? So
What? Like what?
Well,
that's backwards.
No, hold on.
Yeah.
The gender pay gap discussion, which is kind of stupid in a lot of areas, is actually a reflection of the fact that there is a motherhood gap in lifetime earnings, which is if you're a woman who bears children and then looks after them,
time off and that
you
type
take
of
time
thing.
off, then over the course of your life,
Less overtime.
Yeah, you will earn less. So that would be one disadvantage that I could give you, where women contribute a different thing. So you might say, well, men get drafted, women carry children.
It's not a disadvantage.
What do you mean?
Oh no! Oh, they have to stay at home. Oh, and raise their kids. Where's the disadvantage again? The man's.
The men get drafted. Where's the disadvantage?
They die.
Okay.
They get shot in the face.
Yeah, and women earn less money over the course of their lives and have to carry a thing
they
that
earn
is a
more.
risk to their life potentially.
What they have instead is they now don't have to pay for daycare and they can depend on somebody else's income, which is taking care of them. Oh, that's terrible. Oh my God. You get to stay at home and you don't have to do anything except raise your kid. Wow. And by the way, they're putting their kids on a bus almost every morning to go to a public school. They don't even have them for 8 hours out of the day most of the time. So like, how is this the most incredibly difficult job ever, or in some way requires them to have they're the ones who are privileged? You know, there's an old comedian who made this joke, and I agree with it. Any job you can do in your pajamas can't be that hard.
Bill Burr, favorite comedian of ours, but
okay, it can't be that hard.
He was joking though, knowing Bill, and now that he's married with kids, I think his perspective's changed somewhat. But I guess
I'm married with kids.
Right, you're married. You watched your wife carry the baby or babies inside her for 9 months. Like, that's a big deal.
Sure.
So I guess that to me would be one example versus the hypothetical risk of once every 50 years you get drafted.
In a 2-income household, it's a privilege that women get to stay at home. It's a privilege.
But we're not talking about staying at home. We're talking about carrying the child.
Yeah, but the child has to be raised.
And most women in America then go back to work.
Yeah.
At a disadvantage, as we just
Well, that's
established.
not a disadvantage, though, right? They don't have to have children. You have to go out for a draft.
Well, women do have to have children for our society to reproduce.
Well, they're not. So.
Well, I mean, they are.
I mean, they're definitely
not. Your wife
not.
is, my wife is.
Yeah, but what's the birth rate? We're under replacement levels.
I know, but you're talking about a side argument. What I'm saying is, in a society that wants to reproduce, men have to go to war and women have to bear the children.
That's true.
And so why don't we just say, well, the men go to war, the women have children, that's why they both
When are they going to start having the children part of this?
I mean, my wife's doing it.
Yeah, but
your wife's doing it, so shouldn't they have the right to vote? You're not fucking fighting war, are you?
Men, well,
nor am I.
Is there the potential for that through the draft?
Well, like just the potential for them to have children. You say they're not. Well, I could say you're not being drafted. Same thing.
No, you can't. There is no equivalency, and I can point out the distinction.
Yeah, the compulsion thing.
The compulsion, yes.
But for a society to work, men have to go to war and women have to have kids.
I agree, but you need to get to the they're having kids part before you can tell me that there's some equivalency to men being drafted, because they're not having kids.
And you're not being drafted.
But I can be compelled because I've signed up for the draft. Where have they signed up to have kids?
I think this is a splitting hairs argument.
I think it's not. I think that the idea that my children can be drafted, or I could be drafted even at my age because perhaps I have knowledge which would be useful to the United States military. They could do it in 5 seconds. They could bring me on. They in Ukraine, they draft 60-year-old men. Okay? If they need you, they're going to take you. And you can peel potatoes or whatever it is they need, right? Women do not have to do that. They do not have to sign up for selective service.
Yeah.
They're not compelled and will never be
It's asymmetrical
compelled.
in that way.
They can avoid pregnancy, though, right? And if you're saying that they have a duty to have children.
I'm not saying they have a duty.
But do you have a duty to go fight a war if you get drafted?
Correct.
Oh, okay. And this is fair how? Where do we get to the fairness?
Well, not everything has to look exactly symmetrical. But your argument initially was, where's a privilege that men enjoy and women don't? Well, I would argue in a functioning society where where we want to reproduce, women end up with the burden of childbearing and child rearing in a way that men don't. I think it's a fairly simple and obvious argument, right?
And yet they're privileged when it comes to custody and divorces. They're privileged when it comes to child support. They're privileged when it comes to alimony. They're privileged when it comes to all of these things. They have every advantage when it comes to having the child. And so it's like,
It's
no.
a different argument. Now, what I'm saying is the burden of bearing the child is uniquely with women, in the same way that the burden of fighting in war is uniquely with men.
So it's an ontological argument. The nature of woman is to have children, nature of men is to go to war.
Right. And so
Then the woman needs to be fulfilling her nature then, right?
Well, my woman is, and so is yours,
Yes,
right?
but most
So
women
I would
aren't.
insist for my woman to have the right to vote on that basis, that she's contributing, frankly, at this point, way more than I am.
Drafting's collective, right?
Yeah.
So then the duty's collective?
Yeah.
Then why isn't childbirth?
I don't understand. You're saying for women to have the right to vote, they must have a duty to bear children.
Yeah, well, if you're saying that there's a duty for men to go to war, and you're saying that the reason that they do is because that's their ontological nature, and the ontological nature of women is to have children, okay, I can concede that argument. But we just ran into a problem then, because if one is collective and then the other is collective, why do I have to fulfill my duty, but they don't have to fulfill theirs?
Well, I never said that I thought it was a collective duty for women to have children.
But it's a collective duty for men to go.
Yeah.
Well, then again, that sounds like privilege.
Yeah. In the same way that fire safety in your own house is a personal thing that you do, but if there's a fire in the neighborhood, it's a collective duty of the neighbors to get together and try and put it out, right? There's a different something can
Do
be.
you go to jail if you don't do that?
Yeah. I agree with you. The compulsion element is different, but not everything is exactly the same.
I'm not even asking. Like, I agree with you. Getting drafted and having babies is different. We can agree with that, right?
Both important, though, right? For
Both
society.
important. But the idea here that we are talking about, which should be equal, is the idea of duty. If we're talking about the compellence of you, if your country drafted you, even if you're in terrible shape, and they told you, look, we're in a collective war effort and we need you, and you're going to come in here and just cook food because our soldiers need food, right? Are you going to go do it?
I'd do it voluntarily, to be honest, but yeah.
You would do it.
I wouldn't be very useful, but yeah.
Now,
terrible cook, terrible
Now
soldier.
you're compelled to do that,
right?
And part of your duty and honor is that you have to go do it.
Sure,
I agree with this. Okay, but if we have a compelling duty that men have an ontological function, only men can do this, therefore they should. Why does that duty not apply the other way? That to me is inconsistent, and it's a hole in the worldview. It makes no sense to me.
I agree with you. It's inconsistent, but that's because the acts are not equivalent. Like, not everything is the same. I think in order for the defense of the realm, so to speak, you'll have to compel all the men to fight in certain very rare
Where do those men come
circumstances.
from?
Women, right?
So then one duty's being fulfilled.
So I'm all with you in terms of we need a higher birth rate. I just don't think duty is the way to get there. Anyway, wait,
couldn't you just? I'll just wrap up.
Yeah, yeah. It's just
but
it's
couldn't
a time
you?
thing.
When you say duty,
yeah.
Can't you instill the ideas of duty and honor even absent legislation, through propaganda, things like that?
Sure. Yeah.
Those are the routes that I would be more apt to move towards.
Well, Yeah, to be honest with you, man, this is the thing is like actually a lot of this discourse I think is misguided because the vast majority of women actually do want to have kids, but there are circumstances in their life which make them less likely to do so.
I agree.
And so I mean, you made this point yourself. There are countries, they're not having as many results as people would like to think, unfortunately, places like Hungary. But I think the way to get people to have more kids is to get obstacles out of their way, not to compel them through the draft system. Like, here's your ticket, have 2 kids. You know what I mean? I don't think that's going to work. But it seems we agree on that. Anyway, Andrew, it's been great having you on.
You too, guys. I really appreciated the combo.
You know, and it's actually interesting because, like, obviously there's areas of disagreement, but it's just fascinating to me that it's so much easier to have a conversation from a place of complete disagreement with someone on the right than with someone who's progressive.
Well, that's because I think that this comes down a lot of times to being good faith.
Right.
I want to know your view.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that you want to know mine.
Yeah, we do.
And so the reason that what we just did right now, I guarantee you much of it's going to go viral and this type of thing isn't just because you have a huge channel and we both have big audiences, but it's also because people just saw a discussion that seemed real.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was real.
And that it seemed like we were trying to get at each other's views, try to understand them, and we're not killing each other.
No.
Right.
So it's like, maybe we can start there.
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it just frustrates me because I would love, you know, I raised this right at the beginning with you, which is, isn't there a center-left sensible part of society? And I truly, this may be an article of faith on my part, but I truly believe lots of people like that exist. But where is their champion? Where is their champion? Because what we see now is people who can't have like there will be lots of people who watch your views on this, particularly outside the US where kind of more Christian ethics-based worldview is more common, who will be horrified by what you said, right? They will be completely horrified. But we explored that and we got to the bottom of what you believe, right? And you're entitled to believe what you believe. Other people are entitled to not agree. But if there was a progressive sitting in our seat, or even in your seat, we'd never even get to what the views were. And that to me is so frustrating.
Well, yeah, it's a fundamental dishonest. Like I said at the very beginning, I hate the left. And there is a fundamental dishonesty that comes with their anti-realism views on morality that makes me sick to my stomach. And the thing is, it's like, look, maybe I don't get everything I want. Maybe I get 30% or 20% of what I want. Maybe you get 80%, right? But at least we're getting to something.
Yeah.
We're getting to something. We're addressing something. With these people, you can't even address it. Well, because why? Well, because it's unprecedented, says Meth Jaw. Oh, it's unprecedented. But everything's unprecedented, right? Destiny is Meth Jaw. These people live in ambiguity. And so that's why you can't ever get to anything. Everything's equivocations, ambiguity. They never want to pin down their actual positions. And then when you get to their actual positions, they know that they're untenable, so they just obfuscate away from them and they move on to other things. You can all disagree with everything I just said here, but you can't say that it's not reasoned out.
Yeah.
You can't say there's no logic to it. You can't say that I didn't really sit and have a good think before I came to these views. You can say that about progressives, though.
Andrew, thank you for the discussion. What is the one thing we're not talking about as a society that we should be?
We're not talking about the birth rate enough. That's the critical view and component which keeps all of humanity and society going. And if you look at projections for humanity in the next 200 years, it doesn't look good. And ultimately, as a Christian, first and foremost, I am the ultimate humanist. I want to see human beings and more of them all over this planet, having more babies and families and all that good, wonderful stuff. So I think that that's the thing we should focus on more than anything else.
All right, head on over to triggerpod.co.uk where Andrew is going to answer your questions. After years of speaking with and debating people of opposing beliefs and values, what's something you've changed your mind on regarding your own beliefs and values as a result of these discussions?
The empire was in terrible trouble. There were plagues, there was inflation, there were assassinations, there were revolving door emperors. You have huge extremes of wealth, and you have all these slaves as well who are skewing the economy. So these are the preconditions for a series of civil wars. They're waged on and off for nearly a century until the end of the Republic comes.
Barry, non-historians like to draw comparisons between what they see in the West today and the Roman Empire. Is there legitimacy to it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of...
I was kind of hoping you'd say no. Barry Strauss, welcome back to Trigonometry.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, it is great to have you. We had you on about a year and a half ago. We talked about the great generals and military leaders. It wasn't an interview that did huge numbers, but it's genuinely probably one of our very absolute favorite interviews that we've ever done. And I hope more people go and watch it now that you're on. But what we want to talk to you about today is Rome, the decline and fall.
Yes.
Before we do, we might want to tell people what Rome was. What was this great civilization? What were some of the key beliefs and values? And perhaps that will lead into why eventually decline and fall.
Well, Rome was a great empire. It stretched from Edinburgh all the way to Syria and Arabia, and for a short period all the way to the Persian Gulf. The Romans were some of the greatest soldiers in history. They were conquerors. They were tough guys, and they conquered this empire of about 50 million people. They're also extremely good at politics, at bargaining, at making friends, at using carrots and sticks. They're ruling 50 million people. They've conquered them all. They only have 300,000 men in their army, which isn't a huge army when you have an empire that stretches 3,000 miles and 50 million people. So they had lots of revolts. They were civilized. Rome was originally a city-state, very influenced by Greek culture. And the Roman ideal was an ideal of cultivated gentlemen who were public-spirited, who were educated. Ideally, they should be wealthy. And the wealthy elite should do public service and dedicate themselves to the good of the city and their country. Citizenship was a major part of what made the Romans great. When Rome was a republic, the fact that there was a core of citizens who all had military service, who all served the republic, who'd be called on to fight for the republic, that was the basis of Roman greatness. Also, Roman government was not a democracy. It was what the ancients called a mixed regime. The Romans referred to themselves as SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the Roman people. They're not just the Roman people, they're the Senate and the Roman people. Senate is a word that we now have the word senility. It means elders. The Senate is the council of elders.
Quite appropriate, actually.
Yeah, these they didn't consider themselves senile, of course, but these are supposed to be the wise men. They've served in a variety of public offices. Many of them have served in more than one. And they have huge authority in guiding the Roman state. The people have assemblies. They're politicians. There are elections. The elections are raucous. They're wild. They're a bit like our elections nowadays. And so with this political system, which is very solid and very able to call on the responsibility and the loyalty of the people to fight for Rome, they also create this great army, which is flexible, it's orderly, ultimately becomes a professional army. Ultimately, Rome suffers from its success, pays the price of success, and conquering an empire turns out to be too big a burden for one small city-state in central Italy to govern. Also, all this money pouring in, huge numbers of slaves pouring in, competing with free people, free labor, which can't compete with it, huge turmoil. The army goes from being a citizen militia to a professional army, and the soldiers go from being middle-class farmers to being poor people. The Roman word for poor people is breeders. They're mere breeders. Latin for that is proletarian. That's where we get the word proletarian from. Ultimately, these proletarians follow the strongest generals, and you get people like Marius and Sulla, and of course, Caesar. There's a series of civil wars, and when the smoke clears, Rome becomes an empire, a monarchy. It's no longer a republic. There's still a Senate, there's still citizens, there's still a sense of loyalty to the center, loyal to the emperors even when they're a bit wacky. But in time, Rome faces more and more pressure from invaders from abroad, from both sides of the empire. In the west, various Germanic tribes. In the east, various Iranian regimes. First the Parthians, one dynasty, and then the Sasanians, another dynasty. The pressure grows greater and greater, and the Roman Empire should have died in the year 260. That's the year that the Roman emperor is captured in battle by the Sasanian king. And the Sasanian king, to humiliate the emperor, uses him as a footstool to climb on his horse, and he carves this in a big stone relief, which you can still see in Western Iran, this humiliation of the Roman Empire. Empire was in terrible trouble. There were plagues, there was inflation, there were assassinations, there were revolving door emperors, but a series of soldier emperors, strong men, rose to the occasion. They saved the empire by making it more authoritarian, by raising taxes, by taking away freedoms, by ultimately abolishing the power of the Senate, making it more centralized. And finally, the one thing they did was they felt that the gods were no longer with them. The Romans were pagans, of course, like the Greeks, and they felt the gods are no longer with us. We either have to return to the old gods, bring back the old-time religion, or try something new. And they tried a variety of things until they finally settled on one thing, Christianity. Constantine is the first Christian emperor, and although he doesn't require that everyone become Christian, he and his successors make it pretty clear that the way to success in the Roman Empire is to become a Christian, and people will convert either out of sincere religious belief or because they think the God of the Christians must be right, because after all, look how successful it's been. And so the Roman Empire is revamped, retooled into the 300s AD, with these new dynasties, but then trouble arises. The Germanic peoples in the west and in the north organized themselves. They grouped themselves into what one historian has called supergroups. Instead of being 50 different Germanic tribes, there are now really only 4 different Germanic tribes. They learned the art of war from the Romans. They covet the Roman lands. They're raiding the Roman lands. That might have been the end of the problem. The Romans might have been able to handle that, except for a couple of things. One, the Huns arrive on the scene. Attila the Hun and his warriors from the steppes arrive on the scene, and they are attacking the Germans in the various lands in which they live and driving them into the Roman Empire. And they find themselves forced to fight the Romans, and they're very successful at defeating the Romans. Nonetheless, the Romans still have strong armies, and they still have terrific generals who might have recouped, but there are 2 other problems. We get a series of incompetent emperors. In fact, for 50 years in the 5th century, we're now in the 400s AD, Rome is governed by these 2 incompetent emperors, 2 child emperors when they start out, boy emperors, and there's rot at the top. Second problem is that once these barbarian empire, and Rome's forced to let them settle in the empire, that they take away the tax base. If you don't have the tax base, people aren't paying taxes to Rome, but they're paying taxes to the barbarian chieftains instead. You can't have the professional army. So now we turn to the old Roman way of doing things. We turn to the Roman citizens, but there aren't any Roman citizens anymore. Citizenship, of course, technically they're Roman citizens, but the bond between the citizen and the state is gone. The loyalty of the citizens to the state is gone. When Rome was rising, Rome and then all Italy supplied soldiers to conquer this empire. By the time we get to the 400s AD, and well before that, there are no soldiers in Italy anymore. The Romans are becoming the Italians. They're enjoying the good life. They're not fighting. They use people from the outskirts of the empire, and often Germans, to do the fighting for them. So this is a ship that's very hard to turn around. In fact, it turns out to be impossible to turn around. That's the big picture.
Well, that's so interesting, and it's a breakdown, but we want to delve into it a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things for me is it right, am I right that the Romans had, even in the Republic period, that you could, at times of war, appoint people who were temporary dictators, effectively. Is that right?
Yes. So the word, the dictator is a temporary office. It's a 6-month office. And when a dictator is appointed, it means that a normal Republican government stops and the dictator has supreme power for the period of war only. So it's an office the Romans used. There's something like this in Britain in World War I when the Defense of the Realm Act was passed. And there was a sense that ordinary government business would have to be put on hold for the sake of the country. Or in the Civil War in the United States, when President Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, and people said, you can't do that. You have no constitutional right to do that. And his answer was, I want the Republic to survive, so I'm going to have to do it.
And how did the transition happen in terms of, what was the culture and the history and the events that led up to the fact that this society, which was a republic, became a monarchy or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, well, I think in part, as I said, it's the problem that success spoiled the Romans. They bring in so much wealth that you have people who now feel, if I'm so wealthy and I've conquered kings abroad, why don't I get to be a king? You have a series of generals like that. You also have the problem of the poor, because another thing that the Romans get is they get slaves, massive numbers of slaves. And Roman Italy becomes one of the most egregious slave societies in history. This is a problem if you're a poor, free farmer, because you can't compete with this slave labor anymore. And there are some very unscrupulous wealthy people who are snatching up the common land that's needed for poor people to pasture their sheep and cattle and goats on. That disappears as well. And in some cases, they confiscate the farms of the ordinary people and the poor. So you have huge extremes of wealth, very, very wealthy people who have ambitions beyond those of their fathers and grandfathers. You have very poor people who are looking for some way to make a living. And you have all these slaves as well who are skewing the economy. So these are the preconditions for a series of civil wars that they're waged on and off for nearly a century until the end of the Republic comes.
Right. And a lot of people listening to what you just listed might be thinking, that sounds a little bit familiar. I mean, we have in our societies extreme wealth inequality. You might say we have a slave class, which is illegal, often immigrants or new immigrants who are being paid in a way that means the local population can't compete. We're fat and wealthy. You've got these billionaires who are, wealthy beyond the aspirations of any human in history, etc. And non-historians like to draw comparisons between what they see in the West today and the Roman Empire. Is there legitimacy to it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the...
I was kind of hoping you'd say no, but I'm
sorry. I have to agree with you. One of the lessons of the Roman Empire is that societies with strong citizenship can weather the storm. And once that bond goes, they're in deep, deep trouble. So earlier on in the 3rd century BC, when Hannibal invaded Roman Italy and inflicted some of the worst defeats in war that the Romans ever had, the Romans are able to bounce back because they have this strong citizenry, and they also have a series of alliances with people in Italy, especially in central Italy. The Romans are very good at making deals, at saying one hand washes the other, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And they're quite good at making ties with these citizens. The Romans, with these allies. They're good at making ties with these allies. One of the things that the Romans do, so the Romans come in and they conquer you, and they say, who are the wealthy people in town? Who are the important, wealthy, influential people in town? They say, look, you didn't want to lose the war, but you lost. And we're going to confiscate 10% of your land. But I'll tell you what, if you behave, we'll let your sons marry Roman women, and their children can become Roman citizens. And we'll let you and people like you in your country, we'll let you do business with Rome without paying any extra taxes. We'll give you privileges. The Romans are very clever at this. They're very clever at co-opting people. So they build these bonds of loyalty that hold the empire together. But citizenship is the core of it.
And isn't the problem, though, is that you keep granting more and more people citizenship, you dilute the meaning
Yes.
of citizenship.
Yes, they do. And that's very insightful. So in the beginning of the 3rd century, I think the year is 212, the Roman emperor decides, we've been giving citizenship, we've been doling out a little bit more over the years. Let's cut to the chase and make everybody Roman citizens, and they're all going to have to pay taxes now. But it's diluted. Now that everyone's a Roman citizen, it loses its meaning. And in fact, the Romans come up with a new distinction, because I want to have distinctions, between the greater people and the lesser people. I'll translate that as. And that replaces, in a way, the distinction between citizen and non-citizen.
And so the distinction between a citizen and non-citizen is what do you get as a citizen? What do you get as a non-citizen? Because also the problem comes, Barry, is that I imagine if there is no pathway for a non-citizen to become a citizen, the problem is that you're going to get resentment, anger, frustration, social instability.
You do, but the Romans are rather elitist people, and they can't imagine how you can have a society where everybody shares in the privileges. They think that it makes society more effective if you dole out the privileges little by little, and that's how you get people to buy into the system and to work for you. But an example of answer your question, what do you get? So St. Paul, he's in Judea. He gets in trouble with the authorities. They're putting him on trial, and he says, "Civis Romanus sum." I am a Roman citizen, which he was. And that entitled him to a trial in Rome. So he goes to Rome. So it means you're going to be treated better than someone who's not a Roman citizen. If you're punished, you can't be whipped. You can't be crucified if you're a Roman citizen. You have to get better treatment, and you have certain tax privileges as well.
And when we're talking about the fall of the Roman Empire, and we talked about many things, what about corruption? Because corruption seems to me, as I've seen a society fall in Venezuela, and corruption was the main reason why it fell.
No, corruption's not, you're right. There was corruption in the Roman Empire, but corruption was endemic to ancient governments, as is probably endemic to all governments. There's no reason to think there was more corruption in the 400s AD than there had been earlier. So I don't think corruption was the reason for the fall of the empire. I would say much more the loosening of the social bonds, the loosening of the notion of citizenship and citizen responsibility.
Because there's people who frequently talk about the collapse of the Roman Empire, and we're talking about corruption. This is a point where a foamy-mouthed conservative smashes the table, and they're having too much sex with the wrong people. That's why it all went wrong.
Yeah, but they've been doing that for hundreds of years, and they had their empire. So I don't think we can say that.
Oh, really? Because there's also other people who go, well, it's all about once a society starts playing with gender, that's a sign that it's in terminal decline. Is that another conservative fallacy?
Yeah, it is. The Romans will only tolerate so much of this. So when you get someone like Nero, who's playing very interesting games, he offends Roman sensibilities, he offends the conservative morality of Roman society. There's a bunch of things he does, and ultimately he is informed that he should commit suicide. That would be the honorable way out. He's forced to do it. But I don't think the case that
Welcome in, folks. Hopefully he's enjoyed it. Like I said, I played off like a whole thing of like the whole Rome thing and all this kind of stuff. Fundamentally, that was our boy Andrew Wilson. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. It is what it is. But like I said, I got to end it after 3 hours, folks. Is there anyone raiding as we going in? No, there's no one raiding in. So we got to leave it here, folks. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully you all enjoyed yourself. As we like to end off, God bless America. God bless Donald Trump. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all tomorrow for a bit of Wheel of Madness.
Why wouldn't you dedicate yourself to public service?
Because I think it's a very mean life. I would love and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life. And I also see it as somebody with strong views and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular.
I am your voice. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future. I say these words to you tonight. I am with you. I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We will make America strong again. We will make America safe again.